It is an 11,000 square foot, massive, beautiful experience, each room designed to educate you and empower you around a financial topic, not just taking amazing photographs for the Instagram, but also learning a thing or two.
Award-winning finance expert and co-founder Farnoosh Torabi takes us on a tour of her Instagrammable Stacks House Museum. Round one in our visit, the Debt Boxing Gym.
Student loans, credit cards, medical bills. So this is a room where we can really let out all of the aggression that we harbor when it comes to having debt. We have gloves you can put on. People love to take photographs with the gloves on, get in the boxing gym, and just show that they can overcome this.
And after a workout, it's shower time.
You have to rinse off, right? So this is one of our popular installations. People love to take really good close-ups of this looking like they're showering in money. This whole experience is about bringing our money emotions to life and also giving people the tools, the education, the experiences to get in the right money mindset. Because managing your money is part math, but it's also part mindset. We have a bunch of tips on how to approach investing. So this build protection in your portfolio with cash investments and bonds. It's kind of a surprise. It's a surprise and delight moment. You know, don't try to predict market highs and lows.
And if you're going to invest in the stock market, Torabi says take the reins and ride it out. The lesson behind her rodeo room.
A lot of us get nervous about the ups and downs in the stock market. And, you know, it's important to hold on because compound interest adds up. The market's going to do its thing. But if you have a long-term goal, 25 years, 30 years to retire with money in the bank, it's important to not give up along the way. So it's your birthday. Gil, what do you want for your birthday?
$100,000.
Yes, you need to ask for the money or else you're going to get another candle that you don't want.
So you're saying the most successful people ask for it?
They ask for it. They're not intimidated to talk about it. Whether it's asking for a raise or asking your friend for money back, you know, we need to get comfortable talking about these things and be our biggest financial advocates.
Torabi says these tips work for everyone, but are especially geared towards women in her museum because of the income gap between the sexes. Torabi says that may be changing soon.
Over the next decade, there's going to be a massive transference of wealth in this country from the old generation to the current generation, trillions of dollars, and women are going to be on the majority receiving end of that. So we're going to be inheriting a lot of money, and we want to be prepared for that, to be able to make the smartest money moves that we know.
We're both graduating from UCLA next month, which is exciting, but also a scary time, you know, going into the real world, and learning about finances is definitely something that's important, and there's not really anything that's really geared towards women in finances, so we thought this event and this place was just a super great place.
It's so money. Visit Stacks House at 2018 East 7th Street in downtown's colorful Arts District.
Where's the money?
The museum is open Wednesday through Sunday. Well, his term as mayor has long ended, but former Mayor Richard Riordan continues to support and give back to his community. His latest effort seeks to help empower the lives of all LA children. Rasha Goel has more.
Former LA Mayor Richard Riordan and his wife Elizabeth recently made a donation to the Library Foundation for the Los Angeles Public Library's Live Homework Help program. For him, it's about making a difference.
It means that my library, the Richard Riordan Los Angeles Library, is able to help every child in this world to learn.
What we really want to do is make this library something that all of the children can use. And Ken has initiated so many terrific programs, and we're so proud to be able to help those programs.
The Live Homework Help program is a signature program that provides students with free tutoring online.
You can do it from your phone, you can do it on a computer, you can do it in the library, you can do it at home, and you are talking to a professional. There are no volunteers in this. It's a tutor, and they can save your homework online.
Tutors can help with many subjects, and all you need is a library card.
It could be a poem, it could be a book report you have to write. It's in English, in science, and social studies. The tutors are Spanish-speaking as well as English-speaking.
What a beautiful gift. In fact, Richard Riordan made the donation on the day of his 89th birthday. And for those of you who may have not known, the Central Library in downtown Los Angeles was actually named after him in 2001.
I love the library. From when I was a young lawyer in 1956, I used to sneak out at lunch, break into where nobody else was here, and I'd sneak in and spend my whole lunchtime looking through books and tapes and everything here in this library.
Throughout his term and afterwards, Riordan has been committed to helping the library.
Mayor Riordan, during his tenure, presided over our branch construction program, the nation's largest library infrastructure project, which rebuilt and expanded our system from 63 libraries to 73 libraries. He spearheaded the city's Millennium fundraiser that raised $2 million for library reading programs for children, and he initiated Read to Me LA, an innovative early literacy program for young people.
And today, Richard Riordan continues to leave a mark in his legacy as he helps the people of this city.
The live homework help program has been around for 10 years and can be found online at lapl.org/online tutor. Well, it's a way to connect small business owners with valuable city resources. The Mayor's Small Business Summit offered networking opportunities and information to help grow local businesses.
We're at the Mayor's Small Business Summit, and I'm here to see all the opportunities that I can get through the city of LA and meet with other entrepreneurs like myself.
We're here to find great small businesses, diverse businesses that represent our city, that can support us and work together, grow together.
It's a great event to get resources for the current year, moving forward to see what the city of Los Angeles is providing as far as loans, lending, and things of that nature. Get to meet people face to face and talk to them, get information, see what they're looking for. So it's great. It's a great thing to gather information.
It's a great opportunity. I believe there's over 1,000 small businesses that walk through these doors for us to get to know new businesses, ones that are emerging, and reconnect with other businesses that we've worked with in the past and keep growing those relationships.
The city has certain contracts they're doing with a lot of developments in Los Angeles. This event is great to get information regarding that.
When you're running a small business, you're usually just in your business every day trying to develop, trying to make yourself and your business better, and you don't really get a chance to see what else is out there, what other opportunities are out there, and how other people are running their own businesses. And it's always nice to see people that are in the same boat that you're in and get that support.
Do you wish there were more trees in our city? Well, that was the topic at a recent tree summit where environmental experts talked climate change and why we need more trees in LA.
Today is the first inaugural tree summit in Los Angeles. Mayor Garcetti wanted to bring experts from across the country, from the city, community members, advocates of the environment, advocates of trees, experts, arborists to come together and really chart forward the path for making the city sustainable, resilient, and to protect and preserve and plant more trees across our city.
Spent by FEMA in the last 2 years as much as we spent in the last 27 years in this nation. So climate change is real, it's costing us.
In next 20 to 40 years, it's projected that days with 95 degrees or more are going to double or triple in Los Angeles. So it's going to be hot in Los Angeles. So what we want to do is plant more trees, provide more shade, really provide some space for people to walk from their home to the school to the grocery store and not be hit by the sun. It's a safety issue, it's a well-being issue, and we are really working hard to cool the city.
The LA Conservation Corps transforms lives and enhances communities by educating, training, and putting at-risk youth to work. Every year, a luncheon is held to recognize their work and accomplishments.
Today we're celebrating the Conservation Corps, the LA Conservation Corps, our Corps members, and this year's cohort of Russell Cantor Fund awardees.
While there's so many amazing groups in Los Angeles, a few impressed me as much as the LA Corps. These young people, day in and day out, take to the streets of Los Angeles, picking up trash, cleaning up alleys, and making our city shine.
Faith, as we all know, without action means nothing. And LACC is the action of the faith that we have for this earth and for our people, for the students that we celebrate here who reflect our city.
The LA Conservation Corps is everywhere. We're providing opportunities, we're helping transform youth through the transformation of themselves, and we are here to keep this city clean and green and healthy so that all of us here can thrive.
Just like a mom, the Corps gives, and gives. Just like a mom, the Corps pushes you, helps you, and supports you. Just like a mom, the Corps only wants the best for you.
In times when it's difficult to be optimistic about our future, these young people exude hope and speak to the power of possibilities.
The city attorney files suit against TurboTax and H&R Block over deceptive practices. Lake Balboa is a lot cleaner thanks to a group of neighbors, and it's time once again for LA Sanitation's open house. All this in City Beat. City Attorney Mike Fuhrer has filed lawsuits against Intuit Inc., the maker of TurboTax, H&R Block Inc., and HRB Digital, alleging unfair and deceptive practices in connection with their free online tax preparation services for low-income filers. The city attorney's lawsuits allege that Intuit and H&R Block aggressively market inferior alternative free tax preparation products on their websites, which are useless to all but those with the simplest of tax returns. LA Sanitation and Environment will host its annual 2019 open houses at each of its 6 district yards in Sun Valley, Northridge, Lincoln Heights, South Los Angeles, San Pedro, and West Los Angeles in a series of free Saturday events through June 29th. Residents are invited to get an exclusive up-close encounter with LA Sanitation truck fleet. For details, visit lacitysan.org. Folks living near Lake Balboa came out to clean their community. Participants picked up trash and debris. They say they like to do their part to help keep their community clean.
One of the components that we're working on today is revitalizing public space where people connect.
In celebration of LAPD turning 150, the Hollywood station held a party to commemorate the milestone.
This is a big open house here in Hollywood at the Los Angeles Police Department Hollywood Division, celebrating 150 years of the LAPD.
We have the community, we have citizens that live in Hollywood, outside of Hollywood, business owners, politicians. Everyone that is part of the Hollywood community has been invited to talk with the officers, to visit the station, to celebrate the historic background of Hollywood Police Division.
I've always found the officers here in Hollywood to be extremely friendly and outgoing and wanting to know what's going on in the neighborhood.
There's all sorts of fun things, delicious food, performances by local children's groups, and of course in celebration of public safety and the 300 men and women who serve Hollywood in the Los Angeles Police Department.
I'm always kind of thrilled at the comfort and the support that I see from the community for the police and vice versa.
Celebrate the stories and experiences of Little Tokyo. Join a 5K family walk run to help end homelessness. And do you love fresh strawberries? There'll be plenty of them at a local strawberry festival. All this in Things to Do. Looking for a live show in Little Tokyo? Then be sure to check out Unheard LA, the latest installment in the oral history series by KPCC in person. Unheard LA is a celebration of the stories and experiences that give shape to Los Angeles and its distinctive, unique neighborhoods. Don't miss Unheard LA, live in Little Tokyo, Sunday, May 19th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. The show will take place at the Aratani Japan America Theater at 244 South San Pedro Street. For tickets, visit kpcc.ticketleap.com. Come join the United Way, the LA Rams, and city and county leaders for Home Walk 2019. Now in its 11th year, this 5K run-walk event has advocates and Angelinos joining forces to help end homelessness. It's a feel-good cause the entire family can share. So be sure to check out Home Walk 2019, happening Saturday, May 18th at Grand Park on 200 North Grand Avenue. To register, visit homewalkla.org. Love fresh strawberries, food trucks, live music? Then the Strawberry Festival at UCLA Farmers Market has your name all over it. Enjoy strawberry delicacies or take a field trip to Ayala Farms, where you can do your own strawberry picking. Have yourself a fresh experience at the Strawberry Festival at the UCLA Farmers Market, happening Saturday, May 18th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Bruins Plaza. For details, visit castrawberryfestival.org. And that's a look at some things to do. That's it for this edition. I'm Yana Kay. From all of us here at LA This Week, thanks for joining us. A reminder that you can catch us online at lacityview.org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. See you next time for more of LA This Week.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to what we hope will be the final day of the Budget and Finance Committee's consideration of the Mayor's proposed budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. I'd like to welcome you all to this hearing. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee, joined by my colleagues Mr. Blumenfield, Mr. Kretz, Mr. Price, and Mr. Bonin. And we are ready to begin this continued hearing. This has been a continuous hearing that's taken place over the course of, today will be our 7th day of hearings. We've conducted over 30 hours of consideration of the budget within the hearing itself, not to mention everything we do outside of the context of the hearing. We've heard presentations and been able to ask questions of over 30 city departments and bureaus, generally by the top person, the general manager or director of those agencies. And we've heard from some of our civilian labor partners who joined us here for the hearing, as well as the budget advocates of our nearly 100 neighborhood councils as well. So we've had a great opportunity to consider this budget at great length. We've also had tremendous input from the public, and I want to thank all of you who are here today, who are here to provide public comment, which we'll get to in just a moment. Although this is one single hearing that takes place over several days, it's been the practice of this committee to nonetheless take public comment each and every day. We did that, so this will be our 7th day of hearing public comment. We've heard from over 200 speakers who've offered comments about the budget, and we'll hear from more today. So what I'm going to do is call everyone up to offer 1 minute of comment, and because this is a special meeting, the comments will be limited to the budget itself. We won't have general public comment about issues not related to the budget. I will say this too before we begin public comment, that in the process of hearing these hearing from each of the departments, hearing the projections, hearing the assumptions about revenues and expenses, it's been a sobering experience as well. And I think the draft budget that the mayor presented us with at the outset of this was really a very well thought through, very strong proposed budget. It's been one of I think all of us up here will agree that this has probably been the strongest proposed budget that we've had from the mayor, at least in the time that I've been budget chair. That being said, we've also heard very sobering input from our department managers who've indicated that many of our most important departments that provide the most day-to-day nuts and bolts services of city government to the people that we represent, many of those departments are still severely, severely underfunded relative to where they were before the Great Recession. We still have too few personnel in many of those departments. We still clearly have not brought them back up to full service levels in the last 9-10 years since they suffered those horrible cuts and the tremendous reduction that they've gone through. So this is a good, strong budget with the recommendations that we're going to be hearing today from the CLA's office. It will be an even stronger budget, but I just feel that with all of the good news that there is in this budget, it's my responsibility to remind us of how sensitive this city's finances are to potential economic downturn. I shouldn't say potential, inevitable economic downturn. And how much work we still have to do to get to full service restoration in some of our most critically important departments. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and begin the public comment process, and then when public comment is completed, we'll hear a presentation of the recommendations of the CLA, and then we will have an opportunity to discuss and debate those recommendations. and hopefully we'll be able to get through this process fairly smoothly. So I'm going to call a number of names. I'd like you to come on up and be prepared to speak, and you'll each have 1 minute. We'll start with Mike Dickerson, Sharon Varghese, Jonathan Coleman, Jed Perriott, and Skip Koenig, please. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Dickerson. I'm with K-Town for All, as well as the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. And I'm specifically here to comment on allocation of budgets for homeless enforcement and homeless services. In 2018, the City Council honored Joe Reyes, a homeless man who died in Koreatown. The last month of Joe's life was marked by several encounters with police. In the first, his heart medication was discarded and never recovered. In the second, he was moved to accommodate an event honoring the police chief. The proposed budget continues to increase budgets for enforcement while neglecting services. 80% of allocations for street homelessness in this budget are for enforcement, for LA Sanitation and LAPD to do enforcement actions related to 5611 and 4118D. If this council wants to fulfill its promises to Joe and to unhoused Angelinos, we need services, not sweeps. We need to refocus that budget to deal with the problems on our streets, problems like feces, problems like needles, that need to be cleaned up, but that are not actually solved by simply moving people from place to place, which our budget puts way too much emphasis on. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon. I'm also a member of the Services Not Sweeps Coalition and a volunteer with K-Town for All. And we are asking for money that is the $38 million that is currently allocated toward ineffective sweeps to be reallocated for services for our unhoused neighbors. I also do outreach, and on firsthand experience says that the current model is failing. $38 million is over 3 times what's been allocated for services, and that is what is currently being allocated for sweeps. Last year, Los Angeles spent thousands processing 9,000 tents in these supposed cleanups. That's 9,000 homes, 9,000 shelters, 9,000 places to sleep, and 9,000 places that contain literally everything a person owns. And the scene is the same every single time we go and try and replace a tent for one of our neighbors. There's a person left behind with almost nothing other than the trash that a cleanup didn't clean up. And more often than not, we're back replacing another tent weeks or months later. Permanent supportive housing and regular trash pickup are actual solutions that we see work. And we're asking that the tens of millions.
Thank you. Thank you. Your time's expired. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jed Perriott with the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. And again, I am here to talk about the $38 million that is allocated for a failed program. I would remind you that Services Not Sweeps is a coalition of over 36 service providers, as well as community organizations who are on the ground. And we all agree that this money should go to things like trash cans, regular trash pickup, clean needle drop boxes, and I would say outreach workers. I want to stress that because the current model is that LAPD does outreach, that LAPD conducts social and mental health work. I've been on the ground for years witnessing this. It is harmful. Police themselves don't want to be doing this work. I've talked to senior lead officers in multiple districts who have said this. I have spoken with, in fact, the mayor's office, who has actually said they're willing to try this approach, removing LAPD from cleanups. And that is what we expect you all to do this year with this budget, is try removing law enforcement from this process and do a more public health-based approach, treating our unhoused people like neighbors, not criminals.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Johnny Coleman. I'm with DSALA, the No Olympics LA Coalition, Street Watch, and again, Services Not Sweeps. I want to echo what Jed just said, that this line item of $38 million could go a long way into providing sweeps that currently do not exist. And we've seen firsthand what happens when police lead outreach. It leads to death. It leads to trauma. It does nothing to actually improve the material conditions of our unhoused neighbors, which, as we all know, the LASA count is around the corner, and we know that the numbers are not going to look good. So let's take a serious, long look at what this money is being used for and where it could be served a lot better. So go to servicesnotsweeps.com. You can check out all of our recommendations. Most of you already know about them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to call a few more names, and just as I do that, by the way, we've had a little trouble with this mic. If you just keep a few inches between your mouth and the microphone, it won't make that popping sound quite as much. So just a little bit of distance from the mic should work. So I'm going to call up Skip Koenig, Wayne Williams, Tony Tucci, Shannon Camacho, and Esther Portillo, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Skip Koenig. I'm a Director of Policy Advocacy at Neighborhood Legal Services, a member of the Right to Counsel Coalition. Since the start of these budget hearings, you've heard from a number of my colleagues as well as tenants and other advocates urging you to support a right to counsel here in LA, and I join in those requests. Many of you have also met with us on more than one occasion as we presented you with statistics, details, and stories as to why a right to counsel is so crucial at this time. I know from participating in many of those meetings how engaged you are in this issue and how deeply committed you are to finding reasonable solutions to the housing and homeless crisis our city is facing. I wanted to take this time to not only urge you to support the funding request for Right to Counsel, but to thank you for the time and consideration you have given all of the advocates. I know this is not an easy decision because of how you approach your role as stewards of the city and therefore our money, and I fully respect that. I also know how deeply you care about our homeless brothers and sisters, and for that reason, I'm confident that you'll do the right thing in supporting funding for Right to Counsel here in LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Camacho, and I am a campaign coordinator with CHAIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. I'm here to voice my support for the renewal of the LA Justice Fund, as the protection of our immigrant community should be a priority that is reflected through our city's budget. I coordinate the LA Raids Rapid Response Network, which is a coalition of organizations and community members that support immigrants who've been arrested and detained by ICE. One of the ways we support folks is by connecting them to immigration attorneys. In LA County, nearly 70% of detained immigrants fighting their deportation go unrepresented. All of these people and their families are left alone to navigate the increasingly complex and rapidly changing legal minefield that is immigration law. We are grateful that the city launched the Justice Fund to protect our immigrant communities, but we are still in a deep crisis mode. The Trump administration has kept its promise of further criminalizing immigrants, and LA County has become one of the counties with the highest number of ICE community arrests. We want the city to keep its promise to immigrants and renew the fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello, Council. Thank you. I'm Wayne Williams with the California Clean Money Campaign. I know almost all of you, and I thank you for all the hard work that you do. And I just want to make the point about the Ethics Commission staff and the laudable work that they've been doing, how responsive and responsible they've been in dealing with essentially being the police force for the city's good government. And I think it's essential that we honor them with the appropriate budget that they're asking for. I think they're being too kind and not asking for enough. They're very much understaffed, and I know you guys understand that. So I hope you will do what you can to give them what they need to do their job so well to keep us functioning as a good government. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. Tony Tucci, Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife. And what you may or may not know is today in the United States Senate, the Wildlife Corridor Conservation Act was introduced. But here in our corner of the nation, we are already ahead of the curve. We're drafting the Wildlife Corridor Ordinance. And I wanted to say that I understand that the work that you do here today is very hard, dealing with the competing requests for dollars. But today, there's something before you on wildlife corridors, and I would like to extend my advanced gratitude for you to consider this planning department's budget and supplemental budget item. And thank you for making it a high priority. This is groundbreaking, and your leadership in this instance would be groundbreaking leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, before you begin, I'm going to call a few more names, please. Sure. So I'd like to call up Jair Solis Garcia, Mariana Magana, Fal Sok, Mauro Melgar, and Patricia McAllister. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Budget and Finance Committee members. My name is Esther Portillo. I'm the National TPS Campaign Coordinator. The TPS, as you all know, temporary protective status was terminated by the Trump administration. Over 460,000 TPS holders were demanded and asked by the Trump administration to leave. And there's the only thing that's stopping that from happening is a lawsuit. And we know that that may not happen, that many of these TPS holders could be deported. About 76,000 of them live in California. The majority of them actually live in California, and LA is where most of them reside, of those that are in California. That means that at any point in the next year or so, these community members, taxpayers of this community, will be in deportation proceedings. And that is what our campaign is striving to fight against, and we hope that you fund the LAJF fund.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jair Solis Garcia. I'm a resident of the city of Los Angeles, and I'm here to urge the council to renew the Los Angeles Justice Fund to protect our immigrant community. On February, my father was apprehended by ICE, and that day I felt lost and worry running through my head. I was in shock. The whole day I couldn't believe it, my dad was taken away right in front of my house. That night I couldn't sleep. And when I was at school, my mind wasn't focused on books or lessons. It was focused on my dad. This really affected my entire family. Thankfully, my dad was able to receive support from an immigration attorney, and he was soon released from detention. This is something no family should ever have to experience. As a result, I urge you to renew the Los Angeles Justice Fund to protect all immigrant Angelinos. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, committee members. My name is Mariana Magaña, and I am with the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, also known as CHIRLA. First and foremost, we want to thank you for previous meetings that we've had revolving around the Justice Fund conversations. As we know, the Justice Funds came as a response to the draconian policies by the Trump administration back in 2017. Since then, multiple ICE operations have taken place in LA, increasing the numbers of individuals held in detention in Adelanto, a center with 7 documented deaths, recorded inhumane conditions and treatment, which will most likely be expanding in the nearby future. Individuals in Adelanto are not provided a court-appointed counsel to represent them in their case, which makes this justice fund even more critical. We have seen our attorneys funded through the LAJF provide the little bit of hope left for these families and are usually the last resource to keep families together. As a city who welcomes immigrants from all over the world, the City of Angels has an obligation to live up to its values and step up in a time when needed the most. The urgency is now, and our communities cannot wait. Los Angeles must continue to protect the immigrant community from attacks at the federal level. Thank you.
Patricia McAllister, I want to thank President Trump for deporting these illegal aliens. Get in line and come here legally. What we don't see every day are the 100,000 men, women, and children in the shelters. See, we only see the people on the street. Go by these shelters. 90% of them are African American. I have a problem with this budget committee, the budget committee itself. I want to know and see, and we need a change in how this finance, not the budget, but the finance committee works. You're taking items of $100,000, for instance, for one apartment, fixing it up. There's one item you want to fix the building on 7th and Wall Street for $34 million. Now the building is standing. This finance committee needs investigation, because how could this come out of the department? $34 million to fix up a building, which you never fixed up. Okay, I see a lot of fraud and theft going on, and we need to fix it. It's coming out of the homeless budget, the police department, and the city attorney's office. That's where the billions are being embezzled. We need to bring the FBI up in here.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah. Also,
just take a little bit back. Yeah.
Hi.
You
Good
don't need to
afternoon.
be
I'm Paul Sok with the Youth Justice Coalition. I just want to first acknowledge that we are standing on stolen land, that this is a land of conquest. This is a land that has been conquered by white supremacy. That not even until the 14th Amendment could nobody be a citizen of this land except a free white man, not even women. So this is where we stand today. And just in terms of Trump's deportation machine, it is an extenuation of that, and it still lives on today. It is still Plessy v. Ferguson alive and well. And so I just want to acknowledge those things. And as somebody that stood in deportation proceedings for quite some time, that is not a place to be standing alone. That is a place to be standing with an attorney, because you are fighting against the resources of the entirety of the United States government going against you to get you out of here. So that's very important. The last thing I want to say is for folks that are here with Services Not Sweeps, I want to say that a badge is not a stethoscope, a gun, and a firearm. It's not a tool to keep people alive. It is a tool of extermination, and use of force is kind of crazy. So Please don't kill our homeless folks.
And before you begin, sir, I want to call up a few more speakers. I'd like to call up Alexandra Morales, Isabel Suarez, Marcela Hernandez, Gabriel Guzman, Evelyn Scott, and Chris Roth, please. Good afternoon.
City council meeting, they got hustle speaking. $1 billion project about to crack the cement. So one of our investments has become strategic. In California, we have the 3-strike sentencing law. For sales of marijuana, I got one of those strikes. Today, I could look at it as a badge of honor to be here representing my people and being a part of the conversation of demanding fully funding the social equity program in Los Angeles with reinvesting some of the cannabis tax revenue collected back into the communities criminalized by the prohibition of marijuana. It is only right, as we are the consumers that generate that money, because even though I disobeyed the law and was told I was wrong, the idea of being a cannabis business entrepreneur was right on the money. You guys gave me a felony for the past 10 years for selling flowers and making people happy. Today I can thank you, City of Los Angeles, for allowing me to get my record expunged. You guys tried to bury me with a felony but didn't know I was a seed. Now I'm ready to grow out of the dirt and succeed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Morales. I'm the policy manager for CARES in Los Angeles, also known as the Central American Resource Center. I'm here more than anything, because we've been advocating with immigrant communities for over 35 years, and unfortunately, we're at a time where our immigrant community needs us the most. 40% of Angelino children have at least one parent that's an immigrant. 40% of Los Angeles are immigrants. Los Angeles was created by immigrants. It is great to celebrate the contributions that our immigrant communities bring to Los Angeles every single day. However, we're also at a time when in the darkest hour of our immigrant community, we must continue to stand with them. And that means funding the LA Justice Fund again. That means ensuring that in their darkest hour, we are there with the community members, that we are at the front lines. Our nonprofit organizations like CHIDLA, like CARES, and like the Immigrant Defenders are always ensuring that our communities have representation and are monitoring what is going on in the detention centers. And the reality is that we need to stand up and be on the right side of history today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Marcela Hernandez. I work with Public Counsel. Every day we work with LA City residents that are in detention and deportation proceedings. We're fighting every day against the attacks by this administration. I want to share a story for one of our clients. We want release for Eduardo. We're going to call him a father of 4 U.S. citizen children, ages 2, 7, 10, and 11. Eduardo has resided in the United States since he was 2 years old and has been a resident of LA City for more than 30 years. He was pulled over by an ICE officer on his way home from work. As a child, he was a survivor of domestic violence, and he was criminalized. When he decided to turn his life around and live a healthier life, for the past 5 years, he's been a volunteer coach for a youth soccer league in his neighborhood. His family and community were heavily impacted by his detention. The dean of his children's school, friends, family, and even employers wrote letters of support. One of his previous employers even started a GoFundMe. So we really urge you to fund the LA Justice Fund, and I'm also in support of the right to cancel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Guzman. I'm a co-founder of Latinos for Cannabis and proud member of Equity First Coalition. We wanted to urge that the city fully fund the DCR budget fiscal year for 2019-2020 and support the DCR's ask for an additional $2.5 million in funding. The social equity program must be funded. We know that the approximate and projected revenue for fiscal year 2017 to 19 was close to $122 million. 20% of that was allocated towards the DCR budget, and only 4% of that towards social equity and community. The disturbing fact is that close to 75% of the revenues went to a general fund that had nothing to do with the education or regulation, but rather the enforcement of cannabis. We ask that 25% of the cannabis tax revenue be allocated to a community reinvestment, the Community Health and Reinvestment Fund, which should roll over every year and not revert to the general fund. Our response to the budget is outlined in our letter sent to the offices, your offices, and submitted today for public record. You will continue to see us here until we see the money. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Chris Roth. I'm with Ground Game Los Angeles. I'm here to urge that this committee establish a $1 million fund for pilot projects tied to the new Office of Climate Emergency Mobilization. Bold leadership on climate and environmental justice must include investing seed money to ensure frontline community-based solutions to this crisis can actually be implemented. This is in reference to Budget Memo 188. I also want to highlight that the current budget is starkly at odds with the purported Green New Deal that Mayor Eric Garcetti announced at the end of April. If we're going to hit those emission targets, we need to have 50% of all trips made by walking, biking, and transit by 2035. Cutting the funding for the Complete Streets program by $10 million is not how we can affect this change. I'm also here as a member of the Services Not Sweeps Coalition, and we demand that the city shift its approach of dealing with homelessness from criminalization to the provision of services. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, before you begin, I'm going to call a few more names, please. I'd like to call up Paloma Hernandez, Laura Garcia, Josiel Moreira, Rocio Vélez, Lisa Hart, Jack Surya, Blanca Malpartida Gerard, and Natonia Franklin, please. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Scott, and I am a Tier 1 Phase 3 social equity applicant. I stand here representing High Life Caregivers, Inc. Like I said, we are Tier 1 social equity applicants. We've had our building for quite some time, and we see where this the social equity program is going. I stand here today asking that you guys fund the DCR's social equity program and award the program the 2.5 that they're asking for, as well as the 25% reinvesting back into the community. In order for us to have a successful program, we need the funding. I stand here as a stakeholder. I've had my building for almost 2 years. We need the funds. We need the program funded now. I ask and I urge you, based off of the community, that we need the program funded now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members and staffers. My name is Paloma Hernandez, and I'm the Research and Policy Associate at SCOPE, a proud member of the LEAP LA Coalition. SCOPE, along with LEAP LA member Communities for a Better Environment, has been an active participant in the county's process of developing a sustainability plan. So this past weekend, SCOPE brought together community members from Supervisorial District 2 to provide feedback on the draft plan. And I myself facilitated a table at this feedback gathering session. I got lots of great responses, but one question that kept popping up for me is, where's the funding? Where are the resources to make this happen? Community engagement can help ensure that climate investments actually serve our communities, but authentic engagement means that before our communities come to the table to tell us what they want, we need to ensure that we have funding set aside to make that happen. Our communities can't wait, our planet can't wait, so I strongly urge the committee to allocate $1 million in seed funding to invest in community-based climate solutions identified by the communities themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm here representing CARESA and the Central American Research Center. I'm here to urge you to please fund the LA Justice Fund. This is the first time the city has provided funding for removal defense work, and without the renewed funding, the programs will fold and the infrastructure created and the city had invested on will collapse. This is something that's extremely important, it impacts people's lives, and it's really important for them to be able to have legal representation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, what's your name?
My name is Rocio Vélez.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Josiel Moreira, and I'm an attorney with Kids in Need of Defense, and I provide legal representation of unaccompanied immigrant and refugee children who have come to the United States alone. I'm doing this work through the LA Justice Fund. The LA Justice Fund is one of the few sources of funding we have to represent released unaccompanied children in the LA area. Last fiscal year, LA was the second highest recipient in the entire nation to receive released unaccompanied children, and we're on track to being the second place for this fiscal year again, meaning that more than 3,279 children have been released from October 2018 to March 2019 in the LA area. These children are not guaranteed attorneys in court. Their cases require expert legal knowledge. A past study has shown that unaccompanied children without attorneys are over 4 times likely to receive a removal order, and this was done in 2017 before the onslaught of attacks targeting unaccompanied children. These resilient children and youth are part of our LA community now. Please support refunding these legal services. The city of LA cares about the children, and we must work together to guarantee that no child goes to immigration court alone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Natonia Franklin, and I've been an underemployed paralegal for 5 years. The societal injustice of unemployed black workers is disturbing, and it's leading to long-term environmental issues such as mental illness, homelessness, drug addiction, and lack of medical resources, and therefore the spreading of illnesses. According to the Public Health Newswire, homelessness leads to more serious global issues. Due to employment discrimination against reformed offenders like myself, black workers are at risk of losing our homes and joining that demographic. Consider these real-life examples. Black female, mother of 3, who is currently 36 years old, felony conviction of fraud at 20 years old, can't get a job to pay restitution. Black male, father of 2, currently 52 years old, received a felony conviction for selling drugs 20 years ago. He served his time and cleaned up his life, but still cannot get gainful employment. I'm a single mother of 1 who holds 3 degrees and received a misdemeanor charge, which was expunged, but was denied employment at Los Angeles County Superior Court for not disclosing my expunged criminal record. Stable employment for the black worker in Los Angeles is vital for all communities.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Lisa Hart. I'm with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, speaking on my own behalf today. I'm super excited about the establishment of the Climate Emergency Management Department, and I'm asking that you do fully fund the projects, the pilot projects that are to come out of the community assemblies process. My fear is if the pilot projects aren't fully funded, we'll be falsely raising the hopes of our stakeholders and actually creating disengagement and distrust rather than engagement. And right now, we need everybody on board and everybody fully engaged to fight climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Blanca Malpartida Gerard, and as a volunteer, I visit people detained in Adelanto. People who have to represent themselves in immigration court are most likely going to lose their cases. But thanks to the Justice Fund, residents of LA have a chance of success, a chance to resume lives that are productive and law-abiding, and they have a chance to continue making this a thriving city. I spend a lot of time looking for attorneys for people who do not have their roots in LA, and it is almost impossible. Pro bono attorneys are overwhelmed by the demand for their services, and they can usually only take one slow-moving case at a time. Private attorneys are much too expensive for most people. Any reduction in the LA Justice Fund will make this situation more untenable. Thank you for protecting residents of LA.
Thank you. Sir, before you begin, I'm going to call a few more names, please. Laura Gracia, Jack Surya, Cheryl Talbert, Ethan Sensor, Agnes Harris, and Carol Lyles, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Surya Linares. I'm the Education Policy Coordinator at Carecen. I come to you today as a community member who's asking you all to renew the LA Justice Fund. We committed to put funds to protect immigrants in this city against Trump's hatred, and we think that I think that you need to renew this fund in order for us to continue that commitment. Without the LA Justice Fund, hundreds of more millions will be forced into removal proceedings and most likely are going to face deportation to countries where their lives will be at imminent risk, leaving families behind. California is the second highest state with the largest number of people in detention per day, and that means that we have the largest number of immigrants to be protecting in the city, in the state, and in the country.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Talbert, and I'm a registered nurse in the state of California. My specialty is ICU, and I'm here with the Black Workers Center, and we urge the Budget and Finance Committee to allocate stage-up funding and a staffing plan for the Civil and Human Rights Commission. And we are thankful that the Civil and Human Rights Commission bill has passed, but we urge you to allocate the right funding. In my profession, it's appropriate for the doctor to give the right medication and the right dosage so that the right prescription is given to treat the infection for the patient so the patient will survive. So we urge you to please provide the right prescription for this problem, for the solution, so that we can survive. Because as a black nurse, I'm faced with discrimination. I'm near being homeless. I'm had trouble by not being able to support my family because of these DNRs, which are called do not returns. So we have suffered, and we thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you
We
very
support
much.
the budget.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Agnes Harris, and I am representing the Los Angeles Black Workers Center and the need for a $3 million fiscal budget for the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance. I stand before you as a master's degree educator and former director of professional certification, director of admissions, and registrar who simultaneously and successfully held these three positions without support staff at the biweekly salary of $1,428. I was terminated for requesting a raise to $2,400 biweekly for an additional analyst level assignment being added to my current workload. I understand all too well wage discrimination and degradation. I am here, we are here, because the budget for the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance needs to be robust, and $3 million would provide that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Carol Lyles, and I'm representing the Black Workers Center. We are urging the Budget and Finance Committee to allocate stage-up funding and a staffing plan for the Civil and Human Rights Commission. Black workers are underrepresented in professional jobs and have lower rates in manager and supervisory positions. I have a master's degree, public administration, Pepperdine University, and I am unemployed. Again, I urge you to allocate staged-up funding and a staffing plan for the Civil and Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you can just hang on 1 second, please. I think Mauro Melgar already spoke, right? Okay, thank you. And Isabel Suarez as well already spoke. So I'd like to call up again Laura Gracia, Ethan Sensor, Brian McNeil, Jeremiah Gordon, Rob Kwan, and Javier Beltran. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Ethan. I'm with the Sunrise Movement. We're a movement of young people who are mobilizing because we see our future being taken away from us. Quick update on the climate crisis. Carbon dioxide levels earlier this week hit 415 parts per million for the first time in over 3 million years. Last time CO2 levels were that high, we had trees growing near the South Pole, and sea levels were 60 feet higher than they were today. This is the biggest crisis we've ever faced as a species, but if you look at your budget, you wouldn't think that's the case. We have some money going right now to community assemblies. That's important. We need to be talking to our communities. We need to be uplifting the voices of our communities. But talk is not enough if it's not paired with action. We are going too slow, and my generation is already suffering the consequences. Money for the pilot programs with these community assemblies would be a small step to show that we're actually committed to that. If we're not willing to do that, then don't tell me that we're ready to commit to a Green New Deal, that we're ready to invest in my generation's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Gracia. Thank you for the opportunity to give public comment. So I'm here to encourage the allocation of at least $1 million to the Office of Climate Emergency Mobilization. Frontline communities of color have been disproportionately impacted by environmental racism. And it's important to recognize that this is simply seed funding. Compared to the city of Boston with a population of just under 700,000 people, which has an environmental department budget of just under $3 million, and San Francisco, with a population of 750,000, has an environmental department budget of $21 million. This is seed funding, and this is what we need to get started in order to ensure that frontline communities are being uplifted. I'd also like to support the Black Worker Center and make sure that the resources that they're also asking for are allocated. If we're going to really address the climate crisis, we need to address all of the social injustices that folks in frontline communities are facing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian McNeil. I'm here on behalf of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, SB 218. The current proposed budget of $500,000 would cause severe underfunding, leaving the CHRO powerless and unable to properly address the massive black jobs crisis that's contributing to the increase of black homelessness and minority employment issues like racism, discrimination, and harassment against the already underserved people with disabilities and hard-working class families of Los Angeles. I'm a lifelong Los Angelian. 4 generations of my family, who are black American descendants of slaves, have been born and raised in the city of Los Angeles. We deserve equity and fairness in employment. Please increase the funding of SB 218. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good morning. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jeremiah Gordon. I'm a community organizer representing the LA Black Workers Center. As you've heard from some of our members, they are encountering tons and daily amounts of discrimination. Some of our members have encountered things such as being called the N-word on the job site. Nurses are being terminated for literally being 1 minute late for work, and the majority of black nurses are working for temp agencies. Some of them are facing homelessness and having to make decisions whether to pay their mortgage or their disability their medications, and some of our members have found nooses on their desks. So we please urge you to allocate the stage funding and staffing plan for the Civil and Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Rob Kwan. The other week, we found out just how unsustainable LAPD and LA Fire Department's drop retirement program has become. Enrollment has surged to a record high, and officers are living longer. We cannot continue to protect and serve golden parachutes for LAPD. Next, I hope this council finally gives the Ethics Commission the resources it needs. Initially, this committee expressed wide agreement about their modest request, yet last week they received low prioritization. Each of your council offices has a budget that rivals the Ethics Commission's. We cannot continue to nickel and dime our Ethics Commission. For the price of roughly one council member's annual compensation, we could add 3 to 4 positions and finally have a fully functioning Ethics Commission. Lastly, I'd like to speak in support of the LA Justice Fund. It's important to remember the far reach of its impact beyond direct clients. While it takes a village to raise a child, it takes just one deportation to begin the unraveling of that village. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sir, before you begin, I'd like to call a few more names, please. I think Isabel Suarez already spoke, right? If not, I'm going to call that name again. Javier Beltran, Renee Arnett, Mindy Garland, Diane Prado, Talia Inlander, and Joe Donlin, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Javier Beltran. I'm a managing attorney at Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles and member of the Right to Counsel Coalition. I'm here in support of the Right to Counsel. Last week, the board members exasperated on the rising cost of homelessness and especially on the rising cost of buildings, permanent supportive housing at the rate of $500,000 a unit. A cost-effective alternative to save on costs of such expensive units would be to reduce the number of people that are actually in need of such housing. The Right to Counsel can be an effective alternative to keep tenants housed in affordable units and affordable housing, but also prevent homelessness by representing households that are facing homelessness at an average of $1,500 a case. So in comparison, if you're looking at keeping people housed at $1,500 in comparison to finding housing at $500,000 a unit, that is quite a cost-effective alternative. And we're here in support for the $2 million allocation for Right to Counsel. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. How are you? My name is Renee Arnett, and I'm here with the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. Employment discrimination has led to problems that lead to generational wrongs that we need to right. In the 1999-2000 fiscal year, the San Francisco Human Rights Commission received $2.1 million to perform its mandated duties, which are similar to the duties our local commission would perform to protect our workers. Discrimination remains a persistent problem. Black workers are less likely to get called in for interviews, less likely to receive callbacks compared to their white counterparts. Without the right amount of funding for the committee, this ordinance and the promise of local enforcement is dead before it even begins. We also support the request for additional climate change funding. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Talia Inlander. I'm an attorney at Public Counsel, where I lead our agency's LA Justice Fund work. In the last year and a half, 5 LA Justice Fund detained service providers have built new and innovative infrastructure that will be lost without renewal. Until receiving Justice Fund support, 3 of our 5 agencies did not have the resources to serve immigrants detained at Adelanto, soon to be the only detention facility in the LA area. We've brought on more than a dozen new detained removal defense attorneys. Collectively, our detained collaborative has represented nearly 200 detained clients and provided consults and legal advice to nearly 500 more. We've developed a shared referral system. We've built a physical workspace near the detention facility. All of those investments will be lost. There's now a solid foundation within direct service providers in LA on which to further expand removal defense work. To abandon the Justice Fund now will be to lose that investment, and it will mean the city of LA leaving its immigrant community to face alone the hateful policies of the Trump administration. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mindy Garland, and I'm with the LA Black Workers Center. I'm here to urge the Budget and Finance Committee to allocate stage-up funding and a staffing plan similar to the startup budget for the Office of Wage Standards. Discrimination remains a persistent problem in Los Angeles, and as we've heard here, discrimination ties into the rise of homelessness, of hungriness, of hopelessness in LA. Black people are less likely to get called in for interviews. They have lower rates of manager and supervisory positions, and there are higher rates in the Black community of unemployment due to discrimination. And the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance rights those wrongs that discrimination and systemic racism has caused for our most vulnerable communities. But currently, the ordinance does not have the staffing plan nor staged up funding to ensure the right number of staff, the community and outreach plan, or the work that needs to be done. So we urge the budget committee to have that funding. I also have documents for the committee.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Diana Prado, Executive Director of Heart LA and proud member of the Right to Counsel Coalition. And I'm here today to support funding for the Right to Counsel. I also want to thank the City Council for making this a priority and valuing the importance of preventing homelessness and displacement. 43,000 evictions were filed last year in LA County, which averages to about 3,500 evictions. And as we sit here today, in this hour, 5 households are being displaced and thrown into a crisis where they have to consider where they're going to live. Where are their children going to go to school? Are they going to still be able to remain at that same job, or are they going to have to find a job elsewhere? We can't wait any longer to assist these families. The time is now to invest in our communities and stop displacement. Funding the right to counsel is an investment in keeping families housed. Thank you for your time, and I'd also like to support the renewal of the LA Justice Funds, as all these issues are intertwined. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you begin, I'd like to call up some more names. For the last time, Isabel Suarez. You're Joe Donlan?
Yes.
Okay. Amanda Schuft, Christina Marsh, Felicia Carbajal, Nisha Vallas, and Joanna Swan, please. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Joe Donlan with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy and the LA Right to Counsel Coalition, here in support of the calls for robust funding for the LA Justice Fund and the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, and in support of the Services Not Sweeps campaign. I want to speak to the great need and urgency that you just heard about for funding initial phases of a tenant's right to counsel. The eviction crisis has worsened the houselessness crisis, and we know that 25% of people experiencing homelessness for the first time are experiencing it for the first time. And we also understand that the new homeless count will see double-digit increases in that number. The time is now for a right to counsel, especially as we see statewide land use policy, hotel development, expansion, and corporate landlord practices only demonstrating trends leading to the destruction of communities of color and low-income communities. So we thank the committee's recommendation of an initial $3 million and look forward to deepening this work as we move towards codifying a right to counsel and invest heavily in eviction prevention initiatives. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Amanda Schuft, here on behalf of Immigrant Defenders Law Center, asking the City Council Budget and Finance Committee to continue their support for immigrants and due process rights to individuals in removal proceedings through the Los Angeles Justice Fund. As you all know, ICE detention and deportation does not just impact an individual, it impacts LA families and communities, as you've heard today firsthand. Often breadwinners and caregivers are targeted by ICE, and it is increasing in the inhumane federal government policies. The result in many cases is LA families and children requiring increased support, including financially from LA community members and LA City Agency, which costs the city more money. For example, one of our clients' daughters, who was born and raised in the city of LA, had to use her funds to maintain her father's rent while he was detained. And the result was that she could no longer continue to be a full-time student at Cal State LA. She was a part-time employee of the LA City Enrichment Program, and Isabel Suarez, whose name you've called today, had both of her sons released from detention through Immigrant Defenders Law Center.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Christina Marsh, and I would ask that you fund the DCR. And let me tell you why. I've had my own experience in this space, and I got involved with partners with less than good intent, and I could have had my situation fixed rather quickly had I had a resource of an attorney. Pot Brothers at Law ended up helping me, but I ended up spending 4 months trying to find an attorney at the worst point of juncture. And we also have no business deal guidelines because cannabis is all over the place. And you need to be able to monitor your incubators and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. Please find CAT in the DCR. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Felicia Carball, and I'm a member of Equity First Alliance. I'm reminded by the intersectional voices today of our collective responsibility to love and support one another, a value at the core of our coalition. Our love for LA and our community is often our why. Together, we are here reminding the city that our communities are worthy of social and economic development. We urge the city to fully fund DCR's request for the $2.5 million. We support all of our siblings and their asks here today. We urge the committee to take leadership and establish a community health and reinvestment fund with 25% of the cannabis tax revenue. Our siblings in this room could use it with us. Neglecting to adequately fund the DCR and its social equity program opens up the city to potential legal action for not living up to its promise to communities disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs. We ask that we work together, not in the press, courtroom, or court of public opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. And just as a reminder to everyone, when you hear that popping, I'm sorry, the microphone, it's a microphone issue. If you could just pull your mouth back a little further, I think it'll help to alleviate some of that. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nisha Vyas. I am with Public Counsel, a legal services organization working throughout Los Angeles County. We are a proud member of the Renters' Right to Counsel Coalition. And why should the city invest in right to counsel? We want to level the playing field for low-income members of our community who, without representation, almost always lose their homes, even if they have a valid legal defense. We also need to fund or invest in right to counsel because displacement due to eviction disproportionately impacts families of color. Right to counsel is a racial justice issue. Finally, we cannot afford to not invest in right to counsel. Up to a quarter of families experiencing homelessness cite eviction as the cause for their homelessness. We can't afford to let more people slide into homelessness. Finally, Public Counsel is also here today to urge you to renew the Los Angeles Justice Fund. We cannot lose the infrastructure that's already been created. And finally, I want to just speak in favor of the message of the services, not sweeps movement. It is critically important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Sorry, before you begin, I'm going to call a few more names, please.
Oh, great.
Are you Joanna Swan?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to call up General Dogon, Craig R., Yolanda Martin, Trina Traylor, Adam R., and Wayne from Encino. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Joanna Swan with the Democratic Socialists of America, LA, and the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. In his State of the City address this year, Mayor Garcetti said, "We never let a crisis go to waste here in LA." And I'm not sure what exactly he was referring to, but I'm quite sure that he doesn't understand the crisis of displacement and criminalization that our unhoused, undocumented Black and brown neighbors are facing on a daily basis. $38 million for enforcement and not services keeps communities in fear. We see this every week when we donate our labor doing the job that LASA should be doing, that LA Sand should be doing, that the absent outreach workers being paid for this should be doing. We help elderly, disabled, unhoused neighbors move their belongings off of a sidewalk so it can be power washed, and then we watch those same unhoused neighbors actually clean the sidewalks after LA Sand comes through and cleans. So we're asking you, in the name of healthy and clean streets, to actually benefit all Angelenos with a budget that is humane and recognizes the rights of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir.
General Dogon, Services Not Sweeps. And I'm here today just to encourage you committee members to reject the mayor's homeless budget, right? The mayor has lost his mind. When you look at conditions that's on the ground, it's not reflective of what we need to move forward to get out of this homeless crisis. It's a public health and a housing crisis we're talking about right now. So we ain't got time to be paying outreach for the police. For what? Right? The police ain't social workers. Right? And then on top of that, they ain't got nothing to offer, right? Everybody already know where they can get a hot dog and where they go take a shit at. We don't need the police, 10 cops walking up on somebody telling them that, right? What the Hope team's doing, that ain't outreach, that's a raid, right? And then another thing we don't need is this fake street cleaning, right? We do need street cleaning, but we don't need the street cleaning the way y'all doing it. Squirting a couple of toilet water on the ground, mixed with some alcohol, ammonia, whatever it is you're throwing it, ain't cleaning the streets. Right? We need some real street cleaning, and if you ain't gonna do it like that, then you might as well move somewhere. So we encourage you to take the money from police and street cleaning and build it toward housing.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Trina Traylor, and I represent the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. Allocating a $3 million budget is an investment that matches the scale of the problem. Black workers are underrepresented in professional jobs and have lower rates in manager and supervisor position. One story that keeps coming up over and over again at the Black Workers Center are members who have been working on their job for years, and when they apply for promotion, they are told that they are not qualified. But when the new supervisor is hired, they are tasked with training the new supervisor. One of our members has trained 9 supervisors, but is continuously told that he's not qualified. Again, I urge you to allocate staged-up funding and a staffing plan for the Civil and Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Craig R., L.A. Can, the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. I'm here to remind you of a couple of things that are obvious. Obviously, you should no longer be funding, even though Garcetti is asking you to, the criminalization plan that he has for the homeless encampments as well as these shelters, the Bridge to Nowhere. You should instead, obviously, be funding the public health and safety methodology and model, which would be to provide services, not sweeps, for the people. And after that, you need to be building more and more permanent supportive housing instead. And you ought to be taking the money to fund services, not sweeps, away from LAPD and all their line items. They're getting a piece of everybody's budget for their enforcement and criminalization plan. Take the money away from them and do the right thing by the homeless and the houseless.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Yolanda Martin, and I'm an attorney with the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, known as CHIRLA. And I'm here to, first of all, thank you for supporting the Los Angeles Justice Fund. This has provided legal representation for many individuals. With CHIRLA, this past week, we've been able to successfully represent 3 individuals that will now go to their families and be able to continue to be members of this community, your community. I urge you to continue the funding and not abandon your community. Access to legal representation is not just the only thing that the Los Angeles Justice Fund helps. It also helps for attorneys to see the inhumane conditions in these detention facilities, such as Adelanto, Theo Lacey. And we see this in the news, right? We see and we're shocked, but you can actually do something about it. So again, I urge you to do not abandon your community and continue funding for the LA Justice Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Council members, today the Alameda County homeless counts are coming out, and they're going to see increases in the double digits, just as every county surrounding Los Angeles has seen homeless increases in the double digits. Just as on May 31st, we will see double-digit increases in the homeless population. Yet, in Mayor Garcetti's budget, there is $1.3 billion allocated for police salaries alone. $1.64 billion in total just out of the general fund. Before that, $30 million for cleanups around shelters. Before they suck another $7 million out of the HECLA budget. Before money is stolen from every organization in this town. Services, not sweeps. Defund the police.
Thank you, sir. Sir, your name is Adam? That's right. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to call up some more names. Kristen Level, Shannon DeGrooms, Xochitl Sanchez, and Olympia Blanco Zuniga, please. Mr. Kretz.
And just for the record, as the previous person was speaking, it was very hard for me to follow them because Mr. Spindler was gesturing wildly to try and distract us from our appointed duties. I would ask that he be requested not to do that and asked to leave if it continues.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I do want to say this has been a big crowd in here speaking, a lot of different viewpoints, and I want to thank everybody in the audience for being so respectful and supportive of one another. It sure makes for a better opportunity for everyone to be able to participate in this proceeding. So thank you all very much. Mr. Spindler.
So we're here. You couldn't get a parking space at the federal building. Every federal agent on the West Coast is here. Welcome. Hello. So look at your 5 budget members. Not a single Latino. Not a single woman. Not a single Asian. When it comes to the money, you don't trust anybody but the pasty white motherfuckers you got up there. That's right. You're no good. But we have a solution. We have a legal team ready to defend your friend Jose Huizar, but we need your help. We only need $1 million to get it started. So please give us $1 million for the Jose Huizar Justice Fund so that we can go and we can defend this great man. We can get him off. I'm bringing everyone out here from Chicago. Too late. I want the $1 million. We'll get him off, and then you can go back to stealing.
Time has expired. Time has expired. Return to your seat quietly or you'll be disrupting this meeting. Return to your seat, Mr. Spindler, this minute. Mr. Spindler is disrupting the meeting. Please have him removed. Mr. Spindler is disrupting the meeting. Please have him removed from the audience. The speakers who are lined up, patiently waiting to speak, have to wait while Mr. Spindler, yet again, is removed from our meeting. One moment, please, because I want to be able to hear you, and Mr. Spindler is still shouting from the back of the room, continuing to disrupt the meeting, even as he's escorted by Los Angeles Police Department out the door. My apologies to the members of the public who are here. We endure this every single meeting of every single committee and the City Council. So sorry, sometimes there's offensive things that are said. My apologies to everyone. I'm sorry, there will be no disruption of the meeting. There just won't be. No shouting from the audience. You have an opportunity to speak at the podium. That's it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Lovell, and I'm an organizer with the Equity First LA Coalition, the Associate Director of the Social Impact Center, and a constituent of District 2. I have seen that your recommendations address the lack of funding for DCR. Thank you for funding the social equity program, but this is not enough. Our communities are suffering, and LA better have our money. You recommend to levy taxes on companies delivering into LA. Great. Make sure that those dollars go into LA community organizations like the Black Workers Center. Our communities and streets and our shelters need services, and we desperately need funding. We ask for a charter amendment allocating 25% of cannabis tax revenues to the Community Health and Reinvestment Fund so we can stop coming here every week to beg and get back to doing the necessary work. We submit our letter response for the budget for public record. We want to go home to our districts, but you will see us here until we see the money. Put equity first.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon. I'm a member of the Equity First LA Coalition, and I'm a concerned citizen. I'm also a medical cannabis patient, and I'm really grateful to live in a state that has legal cannabis. But you know what? It's just not okay what's happening, and so I'm also going to continue coming here despite my fear of speaking in public, and I'm going to read these papers. So, 1, we urge the city to fully fund DCR's budget request for the fiscal year of 2019 to 2020, and we support DCR's ask for the additional $2.5 million in funding. The social equity program must be funded. We also ask for 25% of all cannabis tax revenue to be allocated to community reinvestment, the Community Health and Reinvestment Fund, which should roll over every year and not revert to the general fund. Not revert to the general fund. It needs to go where it needs to go. 3, our response to the budget is outlined in our letter sent to your offices and submitted today for public record. You will continue to see us here. LA better have our money.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Sochi Sanchez. I am an organizer with CARES in the Central American Resource Center, and I work specifically with the refugee community, asylum seekers in Tijuana, who are currently being forced by the U.S. administration, by the Trump administration, to fight for their legal cases from the Mexico side. I'm here also to remind us that Central American refugees or even Syrian refugees wouldn't exist for continued U.S. intervention, presence, militarization, and violence that is forcing these people to leave their countries. I'm here to ask for the renewal of the LA Justice Fund because honestly, this amount of money is only a symbolic gesture to defend the immigrant communities that exist in Los Angeles. We are Black, we are brown, we are Asian, we are from Europe, we are a global community of migrants that this fund happens to be able to help and represent, and Los Angeles City Council should do better. We should do better for our global migrants in Los Angeles, and we demand you to do so. Please renew the LA Justice Fund.
Thank you. Before you begin, I'm going to call some more names, please. Shannon DeGrooms, Olympia Blanco Zuniga, Michelle Fennell, Thomas Moore, Energy, Marcus Tullius Cicero. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Olympia Blanco Zuniga, and I work as an organizer for the Central American Resource Center Los Angeles, or CARES in LA. In my work, I primarily work with youth and students. California is the second highest state with the largest number of people in detention per day. In my experience working with young people, I've had students who have come and as children have fought for over 2 years for their asylum cases and have been homeless. I work with students who are US citizens, who have migrated back and forth, who have jobs and a college degree but are homeless and unable to visit their parents who have now passed away in Mexico. We urge you to renew the LA Justice Fund. Issues of education, of homelessness, of immigration are not mutually exclusive. They affect the youth living here in Los Angeles, and we need to do well by youth and for youth, and we have to do that through the money.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michelle Fennell. I am here representing Black Workers Center, and also I am representing thousands of African Americans that are unemployed here in Los Angeles, California. We urge the Budget and the Finance Committee to allocate stage-up funding and staffing for civil and human rights commissions. We support stage-up funding that will cover much the needed number of commissions, investigators, and city attorneys for this ordinance that needs to work. This budget includes funding for community outreach, education, and our communities, and our children, our African Americans need this. Let's wedge the gap between us and everyone else, and let's make it happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Good afternoon, sir.
My name is
yes, I'm sorry. Before you begin, can I call up some more names, please? Yes, so I'm going to call up Shannon DeGrooms, Thomas Moore, Energy, Marcus Tullius Cicero, Ms. Kikero, John McDonald, Dan Robespierre, and Laura Gracia already spoke. All right. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir. My name is Energy, and I'm a social equity applicant. And to tell you the truth, the process has been very disrespectful and very, just arrogant against us. We already don't have money, and you're playing games with the little money that we're asking for. So I would just ask that you fund the DCR, let them do their job, and make some money available to the community for community development, and right some of these wrongs that y'all said that this whole thing was supposed to represent. The message hasn't reached us, so we would like for y'all to send a good message to the people, do something right, and let us see it in a form of action, and give the people the money that they need. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so what happens sometimes is that people come and put names down that are false names, but I'm nonetheless going to run through these names and see if anybody is here to speak under them. Shannon DeGrooms, Thomas Moore, Marcus Tullius Cicero, Ms. Kikero, John McDonald, Dan Robespierre, the Red Chief Hunt, who I see, Jair Solis already spoke, Kika, and Ignite. Oh, I'm sorry.
They have the same name.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. My apologies then. Go.
Yes. Can I translate?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. Thank you.
Hola, mi nombre es Jair Solís y estoy aquí para urgir al comité que renueve el Fondo de Justicia de Los Ángeles que ayuda a inmigrantes en proceso de deportación a obtener representación legal.
Good evening. My name is Jair Solis, and I'm here to urge the committee to renew the Los Angeles Justice Fund that helps immigrants in deportation proceedings obtain legal representation.
El 26 de febrero de 2019 fui detenido por inmigración afuera de mi casa.
On February 26th of 2019, I was detained by immigration outside of my house.
En ese instante se me bloqueó mi mente y no sabía qué iba a pasar con mi familia o conmigo.
In that instance, my mind blocked, and I did not know what was going to happen with my family or with myself.
Sentí miedo e impotencia. Duré detenido por más de 3 semanas y mientras estuve detenido, vi que a nosotros nos trataban sin compasión, causando un estrés mental.
I was fearless and I felt powerless. I was held for more than 3 weeks, and while I was held in detention, I saw how they treated us with no compassion, causing a mental stress on myself.
Gracias a los fondos y abogados de Chirla, a ellos me ayudaron desde el primer día que me detuvieron en el centro de Los Ángeles.
Thanks to the funds and the attorneys at Chirla, they helped me since the first day in detention.
También me ayudaron a estar en comunicación con mi familia y me fueron guiando por el proceso de migración, cual es extremadamente complicado. Cuando salí del centro de detención, me pude reunir con mis hijos y mi esposa y el resto de mi familia.
They also helped me to be in contact with my family, and they helped me navigate the extremely complex immigration system. And when I came out from detention, I was able to reunify with my family, my wife, the rest of my family as well, and I obtained my liberty.
Thank you, sir. Muchísimas gracias. Okay, and I'm going to just call the last names that I have on my list and see if anyone else is here. Shannon DeGrooms, Thomas Moore, Marcus, Ms. Kikero, John McDonald, Dan Robespierre, Red Chief Hunt, Kika, Ignite, and Luis Delgado. That's all the names that I have. So if anyone signed up to speak but was not on that list, you'll need to sign up because I don't have your name, please. So come on up, Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Concordia. The Red Chief Hunt on the record. Been down here for 20 years. The Budget and Finance meeting is a great meeting. Ruled in my favor a couple of times and things like that. I'd like to thank you guys for that. But also, the reduction of the police budget should go down to 49%, and the other 5% should go back into the homeless, recruiting and getting people off the street. That needs to be done right away. I'm working with LASA and things like that. We're on a 10-point plan to actually try to get the homeless off the street. The only thing about it is not enough housing for the homeless people that are actually built. So we have a long way to go to get that done, but the support of the budget should mostly go towards the homeless now. Los Angeles police will never make it. Michael Moore can't make change because he doesn't know what change look like. And until we get that problem correct, we need the budget to go towards the homeless people. Thank you to Red Chief Hunt.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Greetings all, Ignite with Life Development Group. Just want to reiterate what we have been saying all this time over and over again, that it is very important that the DCR gets the funding necessary in order to implement what is necessary to make sure that the phase 3 gets going, because we were told, promised, voted that it would be 2-to-1 processing, and applicants would be processed alongside of the pre-ICOs, and now here we are almost 2 years later, and the pre-ICOs are able to take care of their families and do all of those things, but the people who have suffered the most are being left out once again. And it's unfortunate that we have to come before you guys and beg for something that should be a given, considering we know the detriment that it has done to the community. We just ask that you fund the DCR, know that we're out here doing the groundwork in the community and making sure that community members are ready. Give thanks.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kika Keith, Life Development Group. As Ignite said, we've stood here numerous times. I'm a community member from the 8th, 9th, and 10th District. And I just want you all to know that social equity really needs to be a priority. We appreciate the CLA passing the funding, but we need more. Community reinvestment is an issue. It's just not the folks that were locked up, but it is the mothers and the children and the family members that have been affected by the war on drugs. So we're asking you pass this funding for social equity, that you look at the communities, focus on community reinvestment, and that 25% of the taxes should be allocated to our people in our communities for the programs that we need for our children and for repair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So are you Mr. Delgado?
Yeah.
Okay, before you begin, if there's anybody else whose name I didn't call, that's all the names I have on my list. So if not, then Mr. Delgado will be our final speaker. Go right ahead, sir.
You guys think it's fair that people like me with minimum wages can't afford a place and are sleeping in their car, in their trucks, and while you guys have salaries of $250,000? I mean, you guys only work like 8 hours. We work harder than you guys, and you guys are living better lives than us. There's rents over there in West Hollywood and Hollywood that are over $2,000, $2,500. Even in South LA, where you could get a room for $500. Now we're talking about $800, $900. You can't even find a room. You can't find nothing. I got my mom living in her truck. You know, what's going on with lowering salaries? Your salaries, you guys are just hearing us and not doing anything, because this has been going on for years. Your salaries are right here. Just your salary yearly is probably more than $5 million. I bet you. I mean, 250. I mean, when are you just right here hanging us, pretending like you're nice, but you guys aren't doing anything about it. Nothing. When are we going to see next year rents for? I mean, landlords are just what? They have the right to increase rent just because they feel like it, because they own it.
Thank you, sir. All right. I see no other speakers, so that will conclude public comment for this hearing. And I'd like to invite up the CLA and her staff to present the CLA's recommendations in response to the mayor's proposed budget, as well as the many requests and recommendations that we have suggested over the course of these 7 days. So, Ms. O, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chair, the item before you is the CLA's report with recommendations relative to the mayor's proposed budget. It is based on your discussions that took place in this committee, as well as the CAO memos that came through, discussions during the committee hearing process, communications that came forward to the committee. I'm going to do a really, really brief overview. And then to the extent that the members have questions, we can go through questions if you wish.
Yeah, so, I think what I'd ask is that you give the 30,000-foot overview of the entire budget, but then there are a number of things that were obviously of, attracted significant attention during the course of our discussions. If you want to highlight a few of those and what their disposition, according to your recommendations, would be, that would help frame our questions, I think.
Sure. And Andrea and Karen are also here to present any other items that have a specific interest, and we can answer any questions. But in terms of the revenue side, there's been an additional $60 million net revenue that we identified during this process. Most of it is related to ambulance revenues to the tune of $27 million, $28 million in reimbursements, additional property and business tax that has been identified after the release of the proposed budget, prior year reversions, as well as some offsets for reductions in gas tax and sales tax. On the expenditure side, there's a net $40 million in expenditures that are being recommended. As you indicated, Mr. Chair, much of these expenditures are based on the discussions, and I'll highlight for you that there have been significant additions for street services to the tune of about $6 to $7 million. Rec and Parks, about $4 million. The Planning Department, $2 million. Personnel Department, about $2.5 million. And Fire Department at $7 million. There's a lot of discussion about cannabis. There is recommendations in this report to provide the $2.25 million that was requested by the department, of which 1.5 would go into the social equity, and $750 set aside for the public information campaign that was requested by the department. In terms of other changes, there are other changes that total to about $19 million. These were shifts in funding for various programs. It was requested also from departments for street services, for things like overtime, Bureau of Engineering for expedited work on the abridged home sites, and cultural affairs funding as well, and street vending. The net of all of this is a result of, we will be setting aside $35 million in additional reserves, and as you know, Mr. Chair, there are some very, very critical needs that are going to be coming up that give us some great concern. The mid-year adjustment line item, we would recommend that you add $15 million to that. Budget Stabilization Fund, we recommend another $3 million, as well as the reserve fund of about $17 million. This would bring the year-end reserve fund at about 6.1%. Our concerns are relative to the revenue side, which the state has already indicated that there is a greater risk of recession, so that gives us some pause, as well as we're going to have to work really hard to collect the revenues that are due in this budget. So extra effort's going to need to be made relative to the street vending revenue, the cannabis revenue, the street damage restoration revenue as well. So on the expenditure side, the greatest risk, as I mentioned earlier, is with regard to the labor negotiations. But what we did as part of this process is we tried to take a very, very balanced approach to what the committee direction was, which is really a basic restoration of basic services. And so we really took that as the guide, balancing it with the risks that are in the budget. And so what you have before you is our recommendations.
Great. Before we get into more specific things, you did mention additions to the reserves in the Budget Stabilization Fund. Now, given the fact that there are additional revenues being recognized, in order to meet the financial policies of the city, we would be required to add some amount to a higher reserve fund in order to maintain a percentage of the larger pie. Is that right?
That is correct, sir. So when you increase the general fund base, our reserve fund calculation is based on the general fund base. Because we are increasing the general fund base in order to maintain that percentage, additional funding does need to be provided to the reserve fund if you want to retain it at a certain percentage. And so the goal was to maintain it at least 6% that was presented in the proposed budget, and this achieves that.
Right. And on the sort of macro side of the expense part, this budget, as the mayor proposed it, assumes all of the pay increases to our unions that are already agreed to and will come into effect during this budget year. But it does not include any assumption of even a penny for pay increases that will potentially be agreed to during the fiscal year that we will have to accommodate, right?
That is correct.
So as to those contracts, the ones that are still outstanding, the ones where there hasn't been an agreement as of now, what would be the financial impact to the budget of a 1% increase?
So there are two ways of looking at it, because it depends upon whether we provide the pension payment associated with it. So if there is no additional pension payment on top of the 1%, then it would total to about $24 million.
Okay,
However,
all in.
All in. But if all in, it would be in the neighborhood of about $32 million, because not only is it on the salary account, but it's also on the overtime accounts which are rather significant in our sworn departments.
34?
32.
32. So members, just to keep in mind, because we inevitably will have to deal with this at some point during the year, whatever is agreed to in the outstanding collective bargaining agreements, $32 million per percent increase that we agree to is not accounted for in this budget and will have to come from somewhere. It will have to be taken from something. So I just want to highlight that before we get to the other things that we're spending that additional revenue on. So are you going to go into some of the highlights of the things that we had discussed, or do you want us to direct you around that? I think it would be better if we kind of got some top line things that people have been interested in.
Okay. So yes, so we can certainly do that. In terms of the expenditures, maybe it'll be easier for us to refer to our report. I think that there was probably 5 or 6 departments that received significant additions, but with that said, there are also smaller departments that received, we would propose receiving additional funding because they are rather necessary departments like the Ethics Department and Cultural Affairs. But really the bulk of the funding this year has been dedicated to the Fire Department, Planning Department, Street Services, Recreation and Parks, and I'm missing one more, but there is another one in there. But let's see now. So on the fire department, the recommendations contained herein really reflect what the fire department requested. They came forward to request the restoration of a couple of the BLS ambulances, which is provided in this report, as well as additional funding for computer-aided dispatch positions, adding resolution authority for their senior arson investigator, funding for cannabis enforcement, as well as studies for standards of cover and workplace environment and zero tolerance policy reviews. So there's also some additional funding as well provided for the fire psychologist that was requested. And in addition to that, which was part of a separate letter, there was a request for additional funding for the community emergency response team, and we would recommend that funding be provided for that particular item. In terms of, this is a very long report, so we're flipping through pages here. In terms of the personnel department, there were many significant additions for the personnel department, primarily in the area of helping them achieve much of what we heard during the process of the budget hearings this time was that it was very difficult for departments to hire, and that there needs to be a greater effort to ensure that there are enough civil service lists from which departments may hire. And so this committee spent a lot of time discussing what was needed in the personnel department to help with the testing process, as well as the medical exams. And so pretty much all of the requests that were requested by this committee are now being proposed to be funded in this recommendation. So that would be on page 10 of our report. The planning department, there was also significant discussion on the planning department, mainly in the areas of the specific plans and community plan updates. Funding has been provided for that, and also included in here is so that Mr. Koretz doesn't have to jump out the window. There is funding for the wildlife corridor that he requested, so that is in here. It's part of our council member protection plan.
Mr. Kretz is flying high today. I don't think he needs to worry about going out the window.
Part of our cannabis. But I'll be using that threat for the next round of budgets now. Now that I know that it works.
On page 13, street services. There was much discussion on street services, and if there was one department that has really seen a great deal of reduction over the Great Recession, is street services. And so this actually begins, it's actually furthering the plan that this committee started several years ago about restoring street services to levels where we could be really proud of. And so this actually provides funding for the additional crews that was requested by this committee, as well as addressing some of the risk and liability issues. It also provides the top priority that this committee had, and that is for the tree inventory that would be done, as well as asset management. So both of those studies are provided for in this report. Okay. On the next page, on page 14, is the Recreation and Parks Department, also another area of focus by this committee. There's a variety of funding provided for additional the universal play, as well as the bulky item pickup for the Recreation and Parks Department. There's also a request that during the committee process, you asked us to speak with the general manager with regard to the salary savings rate, and so we worked with the general manager, and funding is provided in here to reduce the salary savings rate by an additional 1%, which will allow the general manager to hire additional recreation directors and gardener caretakers to help the Recreation and Parks Department.
Terrific.
Another highlight is in the unappropriated balance, where we do provide the additional funding for the mid-year adjustments. And that is a large request that we were making of the committee to provide an additional $15 million. I know the CAO really believes that it's also necessary, and Mr. Chair, you know during the financial status reports how often we need to go into that account to help offset some of the shortfalls. But also, it's available for any other programs that during the year may come up short. And so, you know, we've heard much discussion about some areas where there may be additional needs during the year, and that is something certainly that could be monitored, and to the extent that they do become short, that is something that could be addressed in the financial status reports, and those happen for members of the audience. That happens at least 3 to 4 times a year. If there is any shortage in those funds, that would be the appropriate time to, especially for an approved program, that would be the appropriate time to make such requests. So I know that there was a lot of discussion about that, and so we just wanted to make that point.
Right, and then the converse is true as well. If there are funds that remain in that fund that aren't needed for other purposes, and some of the things that folks have asked for funding for where there has been no policy developed yet, over the course of the year, as the policy becomes developed, as those things take greater shape, there is the possibility to revisit it in the course of the FSRs.
That is correct. Starting on page 16 are some of the other changes that are made, and we encourage folks to look at that too. Sometimes this document is a little confusing, but there is funding for programs starting on page 16 as well. And the only reason why they appear on the other changes is because there's other sources of funding that might be offsetting, so there isn't an impact to the general fund. And so some of those items include some of the additions for the Cultural Affairs Department, where we are using special funds to help offset some of the things that were identified by this committee that were important to this committee. And so some of the things include the El Grito celebration, which was discussed by some of your colleagues on the council via letters that were sent to this committee, as well as the Madrid Theater is also included in here as well. We also want to mention that there's also additional funds here for street services, and some of these are for the street vending program, which Mr. Price was concerned about. So the street vending program positions, the positions that council had previously approved but were not included in the proposed budget, are reflected here. And so I think those are really the highlights. At the end of the day, if adopted as is, this would bring our reserve fund to about 6.2%. But remember, that's only a snapshot in time. That will change constantly during the year. Our effort here was really to see not only at the snapshot at the beginning of the year, but also the snapshot at the end of the year, where we're going to end up. And so in the proposed budget, the end of the year reserve fund was going to be significantly below the 6%. And so we're endeavoring to try to maintain the 6% that we started with. And so that's the result of, if you look at the chart on page 20, it kind of demonstrates that we tried to maintain that 6% toward the end of the year, which was the reason for the addition to the reserve fund. So I think with that, I think I'm done.
Okay, very good. Well, members, before we start our discussions, I do want to make a couple of additional recommendations of, I think, fairly minor points, but first I'd like to move that we replace the Measure W contingency for construction line item in the Blue Book Volume 2, page 881, with a new line item for Southeast San Fernando Valley Stormwater Project Design. Two, I'd move that for an instruction for the funding in the UB for eviction and homelessness prevention, funding for an eviction and homelessness prevention program will not be spent until the City Council has approved a policy and program for that expenditure. Number three, I'd move that we add classifications to the as-needed position authorities list for zoo, cannabis, and transportation departments, consistent with the list that I believe has already been circulated. And if there's no objection to those motions, then that will be the action of the committee, and we'll begin our discussion with questions or suggestions by Mr. Bonin. Do you want to start us off?
Oh, yeah. Sure. That was unexpected. Thank you. And let me start by thanking Sharon and the CLA and the entire team. I know at the end of last week you looked at us with a respectful horror, indicating that we had asked for about $250 million more in the budget, and we were hopeful that you might be able to find 10% of that. And as always, you exceed your own expectations and found ways to get more out of this budget. Just a general observation about the budget. We started these proceedings a week, 2 weeks ago or so, talking about what a great budget this was, and there's a lot about this budget to love. And then there's still a lot of stuff that I think all of us at the end of the day wish we could do more of. And we've done a lot in this budget as recommended to restore services that got cut 10 years ago. We still ain't there. And as I said a few days ago, there's a whole bunch of new challenges the city faces, like homelessness, that this won't get us to where we need to be either. It makes some big steps, it doesn't get us there. And I wanted to note something that I've noticed in these proceedings. You know, every year the budget is a little bit different. And, you know, there were a group of people who came in from downtown LA who were asking for more foot patrols, LAPD. And that got some attention, it got in the press, it got in the newspaper. I've noticed a lot of different groups and organizations that have been here asking for something else in the budget, whether it's the Justice Fund or the Eviction Defense or the support for the Civil and Human Rights Commission or for the Climate Mobilization Department. I mean, we've seen Chirla and Carrison and the Black Workers Center and the Equity Alliance and SAGE and the Sunrise Movement and Public Council and so many different groups. And I was just struck by what I'm seeing as a growing and emerging progressive grassroots social justice movement in Los Angeles. And I think we're seeing that more than we usually have in the budget proceedings. And I think they have defined for us a lot of stuff that we need to do. And I think for the most part, this body has supported those objectives. And I think we're all somewhat frustrated that we haven't been able to get exactly where we want on all of that. But I want to note that I've seen that, and I think it's important to call that out, because I think it's a really promising, inspiring dynamic for Los Angeles. And I think it's pushing us in a direction we need to go, not just to do the core services that we need to do, but also to address the frightening, scary, dangerous times that we're living in. Which will bring me to the first thing I wanted to mention. After thanking you for everything that's in here, I did want to draw attention to the fact that we don't have any funding in here, and we discussed this, for the Justice Fund. And just this morning there was a story, there was a 2.5-year-old who died in custody at the border. And we saw footage from ABC over the weekend of young children sleeping outdoors on rocks. And I think we really stepped up in a very good way to meet this moment. Because I think we all, look back at horrible moments in displacements and genocides in history and wonder, why didn't people speak up? That's now, and this is our opportunity to speak up. So I get that we don't have money in this recommendation yet, and we stated that a lot of the money has not been spent. I think a lot of it is going to be spent and is planned to be spent, and they've laid out a framework. So I just want us to make sure that, and I don't know if it needs to be an explicit instruction, but that we're making a commitment, that we're coming back and looking at this at the first opportunity. Once we know exactly what the county's doing and once we get a better answer on where philanthropy is, because I think we have to find a way to continue our commitment on this.
What you could do is frequently on these kind of issues where you want to just keep track of what's happening with it, it could be something that's included in the CAO's financial status report, and it could be simply reporting on the current balances of what was available. And as the balances are spent down, the committee could take up the issue of providing additional funding. As we mentioned earlier, we did increase the mid-year reserve line item account. The proposed budget had $10 million in it.
Yep.
We're proposing $15 million, so that to provide some cushion for some of these other shortfalls that may come up, as well as other things that are looming on the horizon. So that would be one way if you want to include that as one of the items in the financial status report. And then this committee will be reviewing it every time it comes up.
That's good. The only tweak I might make on that is that we noted that I think 45% of the money has been spent. When we get to a point where we're aware that 75% of the money has been spent, I'd like some proactive notification so that we can consider it if that happens right after an FSR consideration or long before one or something?
We can work with our colleagues in CAO.
Thank you. Yes. Cool. Just wanted to note a couple other things on here. I'm excited to see the commitment to the climate mobilization stuff that Mr. Koretz has pushed so hard for. Some money in there for the projects. I'd like us to continue to look at DWP and sanitation as additional resources that can be hit up for some of these projects.
Absolutely.
A lot of these projects, whether they come from the citizens' assemblies or the resident assemblies or somewhere else, will likely be things that we can tap into DWP or sanitation funds for, and we should be able to have a mechanism to do that.
When the idea of a department was being considered, we actually raised that in a report to the committee about sanitation and DWP actually supporting that department as well. Now it's an office, it should be no different. So any efforts and initiatives certainly would look into having them support any of those initiatives. So we agree with you 100%.
Great. Could you go into a little bit more of an explanation of
Mr. Bonin? But I'm sorry, I'm going to hold your time. But before you move on for that, because I don't want people who may be listening to hear tapping into the DWP
right.
wrong. We all recognize that DWP has ratepayer funds. Those are their assets. But the sorts of things that you're talking about are things that will potentially save ratepayers money. Whether it's renewable energy that will defer investment into large capital projects to generate power, whether it's regulatory compliance by our municipal utility, for many other ways, there's that sort of nexus that justifies or that may justify spending money in a way out of DWP funds that will actually save money for ratepayers in the long run.
Thank you for saving me from the inevitable City Watch story. I appreciate it. You've saved me a couple times this year. I appreciate it.
You're not going to be saved from that story, believe me. But maybe we can shape it a little bit.
Yeah. Could you explain a little bit more what you've done on the homelessness funding? There is, thank you, some money in here that could be tapped into for showers and toilets, and thank God for shared housing, through some potential LASA savings. Could you just explain more precisely what you've done there?
Sure. So the last couple years, LASA has ended the year with a savings. And so the mayor's proposed budget actually anticipated some of those savings to roll over to support next year's budget to the tune of something in the neighborhood of $600,000. In our review of the current status of those funds, it would appear that LASA may be rolling over a larger amount. And in addition to that, there was some funding that they suggested be reprogrammed. The intent of this recommendation here was to recognize what we believe is some additional savings that would occur on July 1, but also to give the council the flexibility to review it at that time and determine how, if there are savings, how they would be expended, so that you can look at this, as Ivania said, in a more holistic fashion, rather than looking at it at a piecemeal, for a one-off, oh, okay, well, there are savings here, let's use it for this. It really should come back to the policymakers first. And so the intent was to recognize that $2 million, and it was to start that conversation. It may be more. It could be less.
Yep.
In either case, it's available. So if to the extent that it's more, it gives the council greater flexibility to determine how that savings could be used. And the thought process was part of the discussion that you raised, which was the additional showers and toilets, as well as your discussion on shared housing. And so that's what led to that recommendation. But the whole point of that was to allow you to bring it back in after the close of the fiscal year, so we can do a review of what truly is the savings.
I appreciate that. I share the concern that has been voiced inside and outside of this room that and I've mentioned it a half dozen times during these hearings, that I think we're wasting a lot of the money we spend on cleanups in Los Angeles. And my sense is that is not yet the sentiment of the council, which is why I've raised some questions here that will get answered during the course of the year. And I don't think this body is poised to eliminate the money for sanitation and stuff to do some of the alternatives like showers and bathrooms. So I'm glad to see us building in some money for that. I hope that we can eventually shift it once we've actually gotten some consensus on some of the answers back about how spending 30 or 38 million or whatever it is, moving encampments and moving them back is probably not the greatest program we have. So I appreciate that. But you've also added in additional money for aging for homelessness.
Yes, I believe there are programs for, yeah. Programs for, yes.
Because we noted that homelessness has increased 22%, and this will help them grow to address that. There's also the additional money to help expedite the bridge housing projects for
Yes.
BOE.
Yes.
And you also included funding for the job training program, LA Rise,
Yes.
at the bridge housing.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, I just heard the timer, so I got a few more, but happy to.
If it's just a little bit and you want to wrap up, or I can come back to you.
Come back, because I'm sure I'll have some follow-up to some of the other stuff that gets mentioned. Thanks.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Great, thank you. First, I want to echo gratitude of Mr. Bonnet Express. I know all of us feel that you guys have been working around the clock on this and have done an incredible job of putting this together. I spent a lot of time with you yesterday going through a lot of my particular questions in terms of the nuts and bolts of how this document works. But at the end of the day, this is an incredible budget in the sense that we've got more money going to a lot of the priorities that we've had. You know, just in the mayor's base budget, it was the best budget we've seen in years. And then the add-ons and the amount of money that you've been able to find, and that we can further prioritize things, it's pretty incredible. Now, it doesn't, and it's important to say, it doesn't solve the injustices that are in Los Angeles, in the county, in the state, in the world. And we have to, it is a progressive budget, but of course there's a million things that we can all find that we wish we could solve with our paltry $10 billion as a budget, but for all the things that we have to do as a city. And so we are always going to strive to push further and do more and figure out how we can, you know, solve the problems that I know all of us, and this is a very progressive council, are dedicated to solving and moving forward. But it is a great step in the direction toward justice. And as you mentioned, we want to see with the Justice Fund, but the money is there. We've got, you know, the Renters' Right to Counsel, that's also new, and we've got some money there to make this move forward in a progressive direction. And climate change. While we want to see more money toward climate change, it is the pressing issue of our time. A lot of the other ads that we've put in are direct climate change kind of programs that we would do, and I want to note that, particularly in the area where we had a lot of growth this year that this council added on, and that's in the urban forestry, and being able to get the plan together to inventory our trees, to get us on a trajectory to a 5 to 7 year cycle for tree trimming is not only amazing for city services and for quality of life, but that is a direct climate change issue as well, is maintaining our trees and growing our urban canopy. So I recognize that, and that's in keeping with what Mr. Bonin said in terms of, as we look to fund more climate change related programs, we need to look in the areas where we're spending money and make sure that we are capturing or focusing those efforts in the way that we all want, which is to fight climate change. And a lot of this stuff that we're doing, particularly in the area of street services, is exactly that. When we're talking about moving to cool pavements and putting in monies for those new materials and putting in monies for the urban forestry, it's all good. So I don't have any specific questions at the moment. It'll be part of the discussion, but This has been a very unique process in that regard, and that we're debating what to add and how to make this, what was already a great base document, a little bit better toward our values. And again, the underlying things, I get it. It doesn't solve all of our injustice, and I'm going to keep fighting on all of those fronts, and we all are. But it does take a really good step in those directions. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me just thank you for your leadership guiding this committee through the process. It certainly has been an informative, interesting, and a humbling experience, all at the same time. I certainly appreciate the thoughtful and responsive budget that was proposed by the mayor initially, and presentations from CAO, CLA, the department heads, and others who had comments and some really good input. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Bonin, that I think we had an extraordinary level of input from citizens, from advocates expressing a variety of points of view, and I think it all helps to make this a stronger document and a real roadmap that we all can follow. The questions, the recommendations, the ideas raised by my colleagues, I think, certainly reflected the best of our council. And let me just also thank our staff who works hard, before these hearings, during the hearings, and after the hearings. Their work never stops, and it certainly helps us do our job. But this budget, as others have suggested, really reflects our aspirations and our values. I think in some ways that we have not seen before. It certainly is reflects the kind of positive, progressive programs I think that our citizens want to see and that they benefit from. We restored services, in many cases provided new services where they were needed, and so it all is I think, been a very exciting, positive process. And so again, I just want to thank everyone involved, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, for moving this forward. I do have a couple of just questions, observations, comments. On page 24, under the Public Works Sanitation entry, I certainly support those three bullets there under Public Works Sanitation, and would request that we get a report back, recommendations on staffing, including the addition of senior environmental compliance inspectors. That was something I know the department looked for. And I'd like for us to get a report back on recommendations around that staffing.
Very good, without objection.
I also appreciated the opportunity to raise the issue around a more diverse contingent of investment advisors in R48. We talked about that with Lacers. And R49, I'd like to include that second paragraph from R48, again discussing how LAFPP, the criteria they use to determine whether firms are considered to be a minority enterprise, women business enterprise, or how LAFPP is recruiting and identifying individuals to meet their diversity goals. Again, certainly it's important that we invest these dollars and get a good return. It's also important that we have investment professionals who reflect the diversity of our community, and so that would be very helpful. And finally, just to add on again to the comment that Councilman Bonin made, a lot of discussion about the Justice Fund. We've heard a lot of testimony in support of it. I certainly have been supportive of these kinds of initiatives. In fact, I've allocated about $1.5 million out of my discretionary funds for a variety of legal services in immigration assistance programs, and so it is important. And so I would just second the motion for the CAO to report back on when it's anticipated that these funds are going to be expended, and what a plan would be for replenishing those funds in a way that helps fund the program moving forward. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Thank you. Again, thanks for your leadership and your support.
Well, and as long as we're on that topic, I'd ask that that report back also include all of the items that the Justice Fund was supposed to have reported back to this council when we initiated the process back almost 2 years ago now, on results, cost, clientele, all of the things that this council instructed them to do that hasn't yet been provided to the council. That will be important when we make that assessment, I think. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would have to say ditto to all of the positive comments of my three colleagues. We have gotten a great result from this budget. I think a lot of our high priority items are covered, which I think is critical for the city. I appreciate the good work of the mayor in giving us one of the best budgets we've seen. Good work of our chairman in helping us move forward from there to capture many of the other things that needed to be done, and our CAO and especially our CLA for finding ways to fund a lot of these key programs. I particularly appreciate a couple items that weren't necessarily expected to be big dollar items, changes in personnel, which I think will impact the whole city, since we have robust hiring plans in many departments, but without making this change, a lot of those positions would have been approved and then unfilled. I think we'll actually find that by not having the kind of drop-off that we often had, where we'd go through the process of recruiting and it would be so laborious that we'd actually lose a bunch of our potential candidates, by doing things in a more expeditious manner, I think we'll actually find that that reaps us financial rewards as well, by not having to go through the extra process of hiring many of the people that drop off because of it. Also, I think the right to counsel, $3 million, it's a little less than I was hoping, but it's robust enough to get it off to a good start. And as it has been pointed out by myself and other people who have come to testify, this is sort of a wholesale way to pay for resolving our homeless problem. Instead of paying $55,000 a year in services and $500,000 or $600,000 for a unit for someone, it would cost an average of $1,500 to keep someone off the homeless rolls. And I hope we will move more in that direction in the future. I appreciate the funding that we've gotten so far for our Climate Emergency Mobilization Office and some of those programs, and for our tree protection and wildlife protection. I think this is a very good step forward in many of our environmental steps. On the Justice Fund and also on our graffiti removal program, I think if it hasn't been clear enough, we're clearly all committed to the Justice Fund, but I think the message to get out is that we don't intend for this to run out of funds. So as we go forward, as we use up the money that's rolled over, we are going to be making sure we get reports and hopefully continue that robust funding through the rest of the fiscal year. And the same with our graffiti removal programs. We didn't add money, but I want to be clear to our providers. We're not hoping that you cut that percentage out of your budget. We are hoping that you roll along with a full, robust program, and that by the time that you have finished spending that we've actually resolved this problem, and we're not having people paid at a rate far beyond anyone's expectations or sustainability of this program. So if we solve this problem, it may be 8 or 9 months into the fiscal year, but we'll get a report back, and we'll have to find supplementary funding, because this is one of those programs that we can't allow to fail. You don't want 3 months of gangs putting up graffiti and crossing themselves out and putting up more graffiti and having a gang war fought on our city's walls. So those are a few of the things I wanted to say. I'm certainly grateful for the projects that were funded that I consider absolutely critical to the city in this budget. I do have a couple questions. One, the sanitation department's budget requests. There is a request for unfunded resolution authorities for 3 senior environmental compliance inspectors. And I would ask that we consider those. Also, there are resolution authorities under 5 different categories, all to be funded by Measure W. So those would all not be general funded impact, as I understand it. So if we could also consider those as well in the process. And I have one question as well about
before you move on to your question. So for those things that we would be considering, you're asking for a report back from, I mean, how would that even work at this point, to get a report back on those items?
I'm not sure what Mr. Koretz is asking for. If he's looking for an addition to our committee report here, then he's making an amendment to the report to add the positions now. Or if he's asking for an instruction for report, we can include that in the committee report. So it's a matter of what Mr. Koretz is looking for. The second item, maybe I'll let Mr. Koretz finish, because Mr. Price already made a motion relative to those senior environmental positions, already asking for a report to come back on that.
All right, so that's unnecessary because that's already done. On the other items, is there any problem with asking for those at this time, since they don't appear to have a general fund impact?
I haven't looked at them, sir, so I can't comment. You know, we had a lot of discussion about the special funded positions and unfunded positions, so we didn't look at these positions, so we really can't comment. I don't know if the CAO has looked at it. I don't know if our staff has had a chance to look at it, because this is something that we just became familiar with as we walked into committee today, so we really haven't had an opportunity to look at it.
So what would be the best process to do that would allow those to be funded during this fiscal year?
Well, sir, the budget doesn't start until July 1, so there's ample opportunity between now and July 1 to provide any position authorities that may be required, and that would also give us time, along with CAO, to review it. And if you like, we can work with CAO and the sanitation department, and in the interim, we can bring back a motion to take effect on July 1 if that is your request.
Okay, so if we can get a report back on that and follow through on a logical process. Also,
without objection.
Thank you. And I have one other one, which is a question. There's a line item in the unappropriated balance for the sanitation construction crew in sanitation's budget, which is funding of $1.3 million to be provided by the Sewer Capital Fund. Why is that in the UB as opposed to their budget, and could we move it to that location instead?
You can do whatever you wish, sir. But the reason why we put it in the unappropriated balance, it was based on a CAO memo, and if the CAO staff is here, maybe they can chime in. But I think the thought process was that this was something that was discussed during the committee process. It had not been completely vetted yet, and there was also, during the committee discussions, there was some thought of actually having that crew possibly being in the General Services Department. So there are a lot of questions. The idea is a good idea. The idea of a crew would be very, very beneficial. It was really a matter of it requiring some further review and where those positions should be located, as well as also focusing on the ability to use targeted local hire as well. So Patty's here, so she can probably answer more thoroughly.
Well, Sharon actually answered it very thoroughly. There were some questions about some of the classifications that sanitation had proposed in terms of them not being actually construction classifications, so we weren't sure that the right positions were on the table. And then there was the question about whether or not GSD, who also has a construction forces division, whether or not it made more sense for this work to be assigned there instead of creating another construction forces crew in sanitation. It's, you're creating duplicate processes and administrations for certain things. So we just felt that it was something that needed additional looking at to make sure we're making the best decision.
Is there any chance that the timing would be such that we could look at that before the budget's approved, and if we figured out that it makes sense, put it in the budget? If not, leave it in the UB if we haven't been able to do that in a timely fashion?
We can try to come back with something before the fiscal year starts. I think it's just really a matter of how long it takes to work through some of those issues. Obviously, if there are classification issues, that might take longer if, for example, new classifications needed to be established. So it's a little bit more complex kind of question here.
Well, if there's a way to ask that if it can be done in the course of the budget process, that we ask that come back to us, and if not, then it remains in the UB as proposed.
We'll work with the CAO in the meantime. As it stands right now, it's in the unappropriated balance. We'll work with the CAO if there is some resolution that we could reach between now and the time that this reaches council, then there could be a motion done at that time to move the money.
It would have to be presented back to this committee for consideration.
Yes.
And then I'd like to ask, presumably if it's not too late, for two special study questions. One, that the CLA report back to the Personnel Committee with an analysis of the budget report backs from departments on the amount of time their chief sustainability officers and chief resilience officers spend on sustainability and resilience issues, and what authorities and funding would be necessary to ensure that all relevant departments have full-time CSOs and CROs. And also that we instruct the Emergency Management Department and Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to work with the Bureau of Sanitation and the Department of Water and Power to report to Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee on how the Cool Blocks program could be integrated into the Readier Los Angeles Neighborhood Program in order to maximize resources.
Okay.
And I believe that's it.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Bonnet, thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you. Just a couple other things. One, thank you for putting the funds in for the petroleum administrator. It's sort of a small item, but it's one of those things about there's these tiny little wrinkles in government that make the difference between actually talking about something and getting something done. And this was one of those wrinkles, and I hope this will iron it out so we can move forward on the work the petroleum administrator needs to do, and hopefully we can move forward at long last on the voting one way or another on the Stand LA legislation. On the cannabis, thank you for the recommendation to provide the funding for the department, for the social equity funding. That's a big commitment that the city has made. The portion of the money that's in the UB, what are we looking to see before it comes out of the UB? Usually things are in the UB if it feels a little vague and we need a little more detail. What are we looking for?
I believe with that item, we're looking for a review of the revenues, the additional revenues that would come in above that was proposed in the mayor's budget. So what we're proposing, but what we've added in revenue for cannabis to see how that comes out throughout the year, and then if the revenues are there, then we can move that money to that program.
So the money that's in the UB is the outreach stuff, right?
Right.
So we have a need for outreach already, like in the past. So how long will it take for us to do an analysis of revenue that's coming in? Because if we're not doing the outreach properly, it impacts how much revenue we're going to get in.
So the intent was really to look at it also. There was some discussion about the emblem program. I don't know if you recall that discussion, and there was some confusion about what that entailed, and so that was what was driving the suggestion that the money be put in the unappropriated balance. The other thing that was driving it is that the mayor's proposed budget does already provide a significant amount of funding in the budget, which as of today remains mostly unspent. So there was the $1.5 million that was provided during the Budget and Finance Committee discussions and council action. That is the part that's largely unspent right now. And then there's the additional 1.5 that the mayor's office has also proposed. This is another 1.5.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, and I don't know the answer to this, but from the discussions I've heard about the Department of Cannabis Regulation, their pots of money and their funding sources are a little bit like street services figuring out how to resurface streets. You know, they have gas tax money for certain types of streets, they have SB1 for other types of streets, and so the money they have that's unspent, is it possible to spend that on the outreach that they need to do today?
Absolutely. It is general fund dollars. So you are correct in that the Schedule 23, which is the Cannabis Trust Fund, has different pots of money, and yes, they're different colors. So some colors you can only use for this. This is the green one. This is general fund. This is you could use for any use. So if there is a desire to use it for outreach, it is certainly available to use for outreach.
All right, well, I'd encourage DCR, if they encounter any problems as a result of this, to come to us quickly so we can try to resolve it. We can't afford a hiccup. Almost done. I need to note I have a problem. Constitutionally, I am incapable of being satisfied or cheerful about a legislative action. Even the day we approved the minimum wage, I was Debbie Downer thinking, well, we should have gone to 16 or 17 or whatever. So I always think that there's more to do. So I'm saving something positive to say until the end, but so I have one more thing to say before I get to the positive. I'm trying very hard at the request of my staff. I want to just talk about what I think is one of my big disappointments in this budget, and that's the reduction in funding for complete streets. I think it is, really it's an embarrassment for us as a body and as a city. The complete streets is an intersection of our values and our stated goals of doing something that's environmentally friendly, that is a basic core constituent service, and that also promotes safety and mobility. And as a result, it's more expensive. But we've never, ever, 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 and probably never will again, had the resources for those particular purposes with SB1 and with Measure W and other sources. And so the fact that we're not moving forward more aggressively on it this year, I think is a big disappointment. And I think we need to revisit this issue. Maybe Mr. Blumenfield and I can do something jointly on this, because our rhetoric and our reality on this are very far apart. And we've made gratefully investments in safe wildlife corridors, but we're not making commensurate investments in safe people corridors, and we need to do that. And I'm looking forward to working more on that. Having said that, now I'll do something positive. I want to talk about some of the really cool stuff in the budget and just say thank you, because I think it's noteworthy. We've talked a little vaguely about it, but we've made like some big reinvestments in the fire department. The expansion in the ambulance services and stuff like that, that is a big deal that's going to save lives. We're resurfacing more streets. We're finally making some headway on our urban forest. And we are going to, in this budget, be able to deal with a huge slew, a backlog of signals. Those are all really, really cool things. And we're continuing the commitment that we made. Our rhetoric and our reality are matched on this one to update the community plans. And it wasn't a huge budget ask, but I'm really glad to see that we're giving Planning Department the resources to move forward on the policy changes we need to do more to protect and preserve affordable housing. And I'm looking forward to seeing us move on a couple of those things. So, damn, I thought I was going to end on the high note. Just a quick question on this one. I forgot something on the complete streets.
Well, just remember to come back to something positive when you're done with it.
I'll try to
Right
think of
ahead.
it. Write me something quick. When we spoke about the complete streets the other day, and we talked about the funding, there was also some instructions in the very, very, very last page of the budget. On page 1011 of the detail of department programmings that I expressed some concerns about, and so did my colleagues, that we wanted budget language deleted, that without input from the policy committees, put budget caps for individual projects, determined a project selection process, and incorrectly stated that the ongoing projects are fully funded. And I just wanted to see that taken out, and I don't know what the process is for that.
So it's in the proposed budget right now, you're saying, in the detail of department programs?
Yes, page 1011, the very last thing in the budget. And we had said that that was the appropriate purview of the policy committees, not the budget book.
Yeah, is there a question in that?
How do we
sir?
get rid of that?
He wants to amend it, I believe.
Yeah.
So you want to, so you can delete the language.
Yes. Yeah, I thought we had taken that action the other day.
We don't recall that, but if that is the request here, yes, we would.
Yeah,
be
there were three things. One was just a factual error that stated that the ongoing Complete Streets projects are fully funded, and that's not accurate. The other were budget language that was determining what the selection process was for Complete Streets projects, and that we're putting arbitrary budget caps on it, and those things should be weighed in on by the Public Works and the Transportation Committees.
We can add that as a note if that is a request of the committee. And I think what I hear is Mr. Bond is making that request to make an amendment.
Is there any
to make a
objection?
correction.
And what was the page number on that, Mr. Bond?
1011 in the detail of department programs.
Okay, I see no objection.
What was the ask? Could you repeat the ask?
To delete the budget language that determined without input from the policy committees, yours and my committees, what the budget cap should be for projects and what the selection process should be.
Great.
So that refers to the next group.
Yeah.
Yes, now we
Yeah.
understand.
Yes, thank you. Okay, all right. So we usually get to the point, I don't know if this is the point in the meeting where we shower the chair with praise, so that's how I'll end my my good new stuff. I just want to know, even when sick, you ran a tight ship on these meetings.
Oh, sorry,
And- all right,
time's expired.
That was awesome timing. And even in the day we thought we were going to be here late, we get out of here at 7:15. So
That is late by my standards.
Every year this process gets better and more orderly, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Koretz, you had some more?
Yeah, I have two more things I've dug up in my voluminous notes, and I apologize. One other thing is recommending a position authority for an unfunded as-needed basis position, which is the Public Information Director at Animal Services. I think we didn't give it a high priority because of its title, which is a misnomer and somewhat misunderstood. This position is more of a marketing and fund development position, which I think over time will help us wean the department off some general funding and will actually save us money. And by making it unfunded, it's the department's challenge to find savings to fund the position. But I think they will probably find that as a higher priority than some of their other funding, and will somewhere find the funds for this and start to help the department do some development that is badly needed. So I would ask that we add this as an unfunded position authority on an as-needed basis.
So that has an impact on the budget. So what would be the funding source?
I think Mr. Koretz was asking for an unfunded.
Just a report back?
No, I was asking that it be an unfunded position authority.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that
Okay.
it be funded by the department from their otherwise
I see.
allocated
Okay.
resources.
Okay. Is there any comment on that, or by the CLA, or any objection to that by members?
Just bear in mind that anytime we add unfunded authorities, it ultimately does have an impact, but I understand what Mr. Koretz is saying is that the department will use salary savings. One way where we can ensure that there is no general fund impact is if the department feels, as Mr. Koretz said, that there may be other functions that are not as high priority by the department, that if you delete a funded authority in exchange for the public information officer that is being requested, then absolutely there will be no general fund impact. So if the department is willing to identify one of those lesser priority positions that we can delete to add this PIO, that is certainly will ensure that there is no general fund impact.
Yes, and that's what I'm asking for. So that would be great. And a second item.
But sorry, there's no objection to that, so we'll go ahead and do that.
So we will work with the department to identify positions.
Thank you.
And a second idea is in the petroleum products account. In I believe the last 5 years we'd have had a surplus at the end of each year in that account. So I would, and I think that's why we've chosen to monitor that account rather than allocate more money this year. I would like to ask that we include in the budget an Exhibit H instruction on a special study that any savings in the petroleum products account be provided to the General Services Department specifically for equipment or other needs relating to fleet electrification. So in that way, GSD can keep the savings in their budget and make investments that create even more savings as we reduce our petroleum purchases. And I don't believe that would have a direct budget impact, but could be helpful policy-wise.
It sounds like that's a monitoring issue. With regard to petroleum, it's anticipated that there might actually be a shortfall in the coming year. So that's just something that has to be monitored during the year anyway. But that can certainly come back as part of a discussion if there's a surplus or a deficit during the FSR discussions. That's a typical thing that would be discussed in that context.
Okay, so if we could bring that back in that context, assuming there is a surplus of funds in that account. And lastly, I'd like to say, since we have a number of things to celebrate in this budget, we can also celebrate the fact that it appears SB 50 has been killed for the year, which has been a unanimous City Council priority. So a little bit more good news. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for running a tight ship and an excellent budget process this year, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Kress, and thank you for your leadership on that issue. It has, for the moment, it's paid off. Those things never seem to die in Sacramento, so we have to remain vigilant about it.
You could build some damn housing.
Are there any other members, any other questions or anything else to add, Mr. Bloomfield? Okay, Mr. Bonnet, I think, raised an important point about some of the activism that we've seen through this budget process, which is more than we have in the past. I think it's usually about particular issues that are in city services but this has been a year where we've heard a lot about issues about the environment, issues about justice, issues about fighting against the abuses of our federal administration. And I think this budget and I think the actions of this council regularly reflect our commitment to the kinds of values that people were discussing in in public comment. I do worry sometimes when people organize around the city council and sometimes feel as though what the city council does is a win or a defeat, when the issues that were discussed were all societal, systemic, national, even global issues. And we play a part in that, to be sure. But whether or not we, as Mr. Blumenfield correctly observed, I think, whether or not we are the final solution, final answer on those things is usually not the case. We play a role, but other levels of government, other parts of society, the philanthropic community, and others certainly have to play an important role in all of those things as well. And so I think we also need to be mindful of the fact that the people that don't come in here, who don't organize as collective groups, the people who want to make sure that their streets are paved, that their neighborhoods are safe, that they can take their kids to the park and there will be services there, that their fire department will respond to them in a timely manner so that people who are having cardiac arrest will survive instead of dying. The things like that are basic core services of the city often don't get people lining up at the microphone. And that's where our job gets very hard. Yep. Our job is to ensure that we take care of those things that reflect our values and the values of the people that we represent, but also reflect the very important function that this city serves to the people who are not organized, who worry about the future of the city and about their day-to-day lives, and don't come here to testify. So I think it's really important that we remember that balance all the time. And when it comes to the particular issues that were discussed, the Justice Fund and others, I don't want us to leave an impression that we are too farther ahead on that than we are. Mr. Kress, you kind of mentioned our collective commitment, and I think we all collectively agree on the importance of that work, but without reports back, without accounting, without a commitment by the county or the philanthropic community or others who committed last time, I would say it's premature to say, at least I speak for myself, I think it's premature for me, and I think it would be premature for any of us to speak for the entire city council and saying that we're committed to making expenditures for those things until we have that before us. So I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that there should be some expectation of permanent continuity of funding for things that, we never have agreed to permanently continue to fund. So that's a decision that the city council will have to make. The information that we need to make that decision is not at all before us yet. So that'll be a continuing discussion that we'll have over the course of the year. I would like to make one other request on behalf of the mayor's office. The mayor has requested that $300,000 be appropriated out of the unexpended appropriation line item in Schedule 24 of the Arts and Cultural Facilities and Services Trust Fund for purposes of the lighting improvements for the city facilities at the Civic Center. And I'd like to go ahead, and if there's no objection to doing that, we'd like to go ahead and there are funds available in that account, so we'll go ahead and without objection do that. And with that, members, if there's no other comments or questions, no, I'm not quite done yet. Don't jump up yet. There's many people. We're about to approve recommendations that we're going to put before the City Council of Los Angeles for $10 billion in expenditures. That's a monumental task that touches every aspect of the life of people in Los Angeles. And that is not something that we just do without the incredible contribution of many, many people. I want to first thank all of the members of the public who participated in this process. Over the course of 7 meetings, hundreds of people came down here to talk. I want to thank the representatives of our hardworking men and women who serve this city, our employees, the neighborhood council, budget advocates who came down and participated, all of the organized advocacy groups who came down to participate and push for a particular cause that they were passionate about. For sure, we can't do this work without that kind of public engagement. In terms of this meeting itself and the work of the Budget and Finance Committee, I want to thank our longtime clerk Richard Williams and our new clerk Andrew Choi, who I think this is the first big budget process that Andrew's been involved with, and it was seamless, so thank you very much for your work. Of course, I want to thank our great CAO, Rich Llewellyn, and his entire staff, particularly Ben Ceja, Jacob Wexler, Janelle Irving, and this year especially, more than in previous years even, the Budget Memo Squad, who had an extraordinary amount of work this year compared to most. Of course, our CLA, as we've just witnessed, and as Mr. Bonin correctly, I think, started us off with this discussion with the statement that you always exceed your own expectations. We always have the highest of expectations, and you always meet it because we know that you always will. So I want to thank our CLA, Sharon So, and Karen Kalfayan, Andrea Galvin, and the entire CLA team, many of whom, are not seen in these hearings, but make the CLA's office work. Of course, we want to thank our council leadership, Council President Wesson, and all of his deputies, especially Andrew Westall, Ed Johnson, and Justin Wesson. And we've said it many times throughout this hearing, bears saying again. To the mayor of Los Angeles and his budget team, led by Matt Sabo, Diana Mangioglu, Miguel Sanglang, and the entire mayor's budget team. This really was extraordinary work. It was, these are not easy times. These are, we have tremendous competing challenges. What the mayor and his staff did was took a realistic, honest look at where we are, engaged in an open process, anticipated the needs and priorities that this council would likely express, and took them into account. It was a terrific collaborative effort, and we thank all of you. And of course, for all of the people who had to respond to our many, many budget memos this year, to all of our general managers and department staff who came here to testify and did all that work to respond to all of our questions and prepare for it. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. We hope that you are as satisfied as you can be with the end result of the work that we've done. And then Mr. Price mentioned earlier, and of course, we all have to say thank you to our own staffs, our entire staff, but especially our budget advisors who help us so much during this time. Marissa Alcaraz, Krista Klein, David Hirsch, Jeff Jacoberger, all of whom really make us look as good as we can during this process. Thank you for all of your work in helping us to get through this process. And I especially want to thank my team and the entire Council District 2 staff. This is my 8th budget as budget chair, and every one of them has involved the entire staff, my policy team, my district office, my planning team, my transportation advisors, but especially my chiefs of staff, Cara Trosian this year. And as you've seen this year, we've had a transfer. The torch has been passed to a new generation of leadership this year, as Anna Hovasapian has taken over the role as leading the charge for the Budget and Finance Committee through the budget. I want to thank all of them. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank the man who has been the champion of the people of Los Angeles through the budget process now for 8 years, who has led this process on behalf of my office. This, I suppose, maybe, I don't know, maybe the last time we get to say thank you to, not because he's going anywhere, but just because Anna has so ably taken over. But I do want to give special thanks to Matt Hale, who for 8 years has done this work and made sure that we've gotten to the point that we are. So thank you, Matt, and thank you all very, very much for your participation. So, did you get the camera on, Matt? We want to. Okay, good. And with that, as amended, I would like to propose that we accept the CLA's recommendations as amended by the statements that we've each made today and the actions that we've taken today. So that will be my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any objection? Is there anything else we need to do?
There is nothing else you need to do, but the CLA would also like to thank her staff as well for all their effort, and the CAO's office for their assistance, as well as the department heads and mayor's office, and of course the council members and your staff. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, if there's no objection, then that it will be the action of the committee to approve the CLA's recommendations as amended by our actions today. And with that, the Budget and Finance Committee is adjourned.
Job well done, sir.
All right. Thank you.